Lorraine Cox was a 32-year-old woman living in Exeter, UK. She is dating a man named Ellie who lives in Scotland. Although the distance between them is quite long, they have gotten used to it. At first, they only met on weekends and talked, but gradually their feelings for each other grew deeper. By 2020, they had been in contact in this way for 2 years. Despite the challenges of the distance, they decided to get engaged. Now, they are building a future together and preparing for their wedding. Lorraine is also planning to have their first child. However, in early 2020, their plans had to change for several reasons. By February, Lorraine had moved to Scotland to be with Ellie, where she obtained a temporary visa, and they spent considerable time together. When summer arrived, she wanted to return to Exeter to visit her family and friends for a month or two. This trip was not a breakup, she simply missed her loved ones. Afterward, she intended to return to Scotland and continue strengthening their relationship. Although restrictions in the UK remained strict, they were gradually relaxing, allowing public events to resume and many establishments to reopen. People eagerly took to the streets to socialize again, and Lorraine was no exception. On September 1st, 2020, she arrived at her father's house in Exeter, excited to reconnect with friends. They spent the evening visiting several bars, enjoying drinks and good company, until they realized it was time to go home. Everyone left in a good mood. On September 2nd, Lorraine posted an unusual message on social media, claiming she was going to leave the country. This surprised everyone, as her only previous move had been to Scotland, and she had no plans to relocate again. She had just arrived to visit her father and intended to stay for at least a month. This sudden change in her mood and plans seemed out of character. In her post, Lorraine mentioned wanting to move about 50 kilometers from her father's house to a place called Plymouth, which she described as the first stop on her planned journey. This behavior was shocking because Lorraine was not known for making impulsive decisions, especially on such a significant scale. She had a stable life and a loving relationship in Scotland and had never mentioned wanting to move elsewhere. Now, she was considering a move toward France. Unsurprisingly, this post had a deep impact on Ellie. They had a strong relationship, making his fear of losing her understandable. Lorraine's friends bombarded her with questions. Initially, she responded willingly, but as the conversation progressed, her tone changed and mistrust grew. Those who knew her well noticed shifts in her writing style. She began using unfamiliar emojis, making odd mistakes, and her messages conveyed a sense of hostility. This worried her loved ones, as she had always maintained positive relationships with them, and there was no reason for her to display such aggression or undergo drastic life changes. Her father, Tony, who was hosting her during this time, even showed a family friend her old messages alongside the new ones. He pointed out clear inconsistencies in her writing style. Even those who didn't know her well noticed something was off. Throughout this time, Lorraine's boyfriend, who was named Ellie, was especially concerned and tried to understand her behavior. Initially, she responded to him with short, cold replies, but eventually, her answers became even more abrupt. The conversation ended when Lorraine sent him an emoji of a middle finger. This intensified the suspicion that someone else was using her account. Ellie had known Lorraine for 2 years, so the idea that the trip was related to a breakup or conflict seemed unlikely. They valued each other, which made her odd responses even more perplexing. Unfortunately, because of the distance, her boyfriend felt helpless and unable to intervene. A situation arose concerning Tony, Lorraine's father. Determined to discover the truth, he faced a challenge because he was away at the time and couldn't check his daughter's room for clues. Instead, he began speaking to Lorraine's friends, particularly those who had been with her the day before her sudden move to Plymouth. He was scheduled to return home the next day. Upon arriving home, Tony's first action was to go to Lorraine's room, where his suspicions grew stronger. He had already spoken with her close friends, and they all confirmed that no one had seen Lorraine since their breakup at the bar when everyone had left for the night. Inside Lorraine's room, it appeared as though she had never returned after her outing with friends. Her belongings from Scotland remained untouched, and nothing was missing from her room. It looked as if she had left for an extended trip without taking any of her things, which seemed impossible. The most alarming discovery was the bag she had left behind. Lorraine had diabetes and always carried a first aid kit to monitor her blood sugar levels. Her health depended on these supplies, and she never went anywhere, even for a quick trip to the store, without them. For outings like the one to the bar, she typically used a smaller bag. The fact that her larger kit was still in her room raised serious concerns about her recent plans. Tony realized that his daughter had not returned from the party, leading him to fear that something might have happened to her health. The messages she had exchanged with friends and relatives also seemed troubling. Worried, Tony sent another message to Lorraine on social media, expressing concern for her health and asking if she was okay. He warned her that if she did not respond, he would have to contact the police. The message was seen, but he received no reply. After that, Tony's and Lorraine's friends could no longer tolerate the uncertainty and began their search. They started by looking for clues in the bar where they had spent the evening on September 2nd. They interviewed witnesses, distributed flyers, and retraced the presumed route Lorraine would have taken home. It was clear that something alarming must have happened during her journey since she never came home again. Law enforcement and journalists quickly became involved. They were skeptical of the theory that Lorraine might have suffered a health crisis. Detectives believed that if that were the case, she would not have been able to send messages to her friends. Furthermore, several days had passed since her disappearance, and she would likely have been found in a hospital, but tests of recent admissions yielded no results. It appeared far more likely that Lorraine had encountered danger from someone. Journalists rushed to report on the situation, highlighting concerns over Lorraine's disappearance. They recalled that in May 2018, 2 years before Lorraine vanished, an attacker named Robert Proud had attacked a woman who strikingly resembled her. He had abused her but did not kill her, and then evaded capture for a long time. Given his criminal history, it raised fears that there could be more victims. Although he had completed his prison sentence, investigators began considering Lorraine as a potential victim. At the time of her disappearance, Robert was living near the path Lorraine would have taken home. This connection led to his arrest, and police sought to extract a confession from him. They believed he had kidnapped, abused, and possibly killed her, and that he might have disposed of her body. It was suspected that he took her phone and pretended to communicate with her friends and family to buy himself time and create confusion. There was another theory regarding Lorraine's disappearance. Some believed that Robert might have attacked her, but instead of dying, she was hiding to avoid becoming his victim again. The detectives prioritized finding Lorraine because she was clearly in danger. Robert might have been holding her hostage. The situation could have escalated, posing a significant threat. To test this theory, they began reviewing surveillance footage from cameras along Lorraine's potential route that night. Even after narrowing down the time frame, they had about 11,000 hours of footage from over 400 cameras across 120 different locations. Analyzing this footage was time-consuming, but it proved worthwhile, yielding the first clues needed to catch the criminal. Eventually, they spotted a girl who matched Lorraine's description in the recordings. After leaving her friends at the bar, she headed toward her father's house without making any turns. She almost made it home, but a few blocks away, something caught her attention: a kebab shop on the ground floor of an apartment building, which was open at night. Lorraine went inside, likely to grab a snack, and then left to eat on a bench before continuing her way home. Around 2:45 a.m., she returned to the kebab shop, but this time accompanied by an unfamiliar man. This raised alarms because he didn't appear to be just a random passerby. The footage suggested they had interacted, and he had managed to get her attention. The police continued to investigate the recordings and noted that the young man had been following Lorraine after they left the shop. This behavior was concerning, especially since she seemed to be walking voluntarily and the street was deserted. Detectives suspected the man might be a predator who targeted his victim, potentially involved in Lorraine's disappearance and the messages she had sent to her loved ones after the incident. He maintained a distance while following her, trying to remain inconspicuous, and seemed to be assessing the situation. It looked as though he was stalking her, especially since she appeared intoxicated and was stumbling. She had a valuable phone, and with no one accompanying her that night, he saw an opportunity to attack. The police attempted to locate another recording to determine how Lorraine left the building from at least one camera, but were unsuccessful. It appeared she had not exited at all. They spent considerable time reviewing the video footage, only to confirm that Lorraine had not left since she was last seen. The detectives concluded that she might still be inside, possibly being held against her will. Unfortunately, by the time they gathered this information, 8 days had passed. Given this long duration, only a miracle could save Lorraine, who suffered from diabetes. Nevertheless, her family held on to hope. The police obtained a clear photo of the man who accompanied and followed Lorraine that night. They printed it out and began distributing it through the media to attract witnesses. Initially, they visited the kebab shop and spoke with the owner. He informed them that he lived above the shop but had rented the apartment below to a young man about a month ago. This young man had moved in unofficially and was very withdrawn, to the extent that the owner didn't know much about him. The owner even expressed doubts about the young man's name. When police officers visited the apartment, they anticipated finding a crime scene. However, everything was surprisingly neat and clean. The young man living there identified himself as Christopher Mayer and showed them his identification. There was no sign of Lorraine in the apartment, and he allowed the detectives inside without any resistance. They inspected the place thoroughly to ensure that no one was being held against their will. Christopher was then shown a photo of Lorraine, along with a CCTV image in which a man resembling him was seen accompanying her to the house. He strongly denied any connection, claiming that he did not know her. However, the clear photograph made the police skeptical, as the similarities were unmistakable. A brief verbal confrontation ensued, with Christopher maintaining his stance. During this exchange, he insisted that he would never bring a strange woman to his apartment. The police then became interested in Christopher's mobile phone, which they seized for examination. They discovered that it contained Lorraine's SIM card, although the card was currently missing. This evidence confirmed that he had at least seen her recently. Further investigation revealed that a suspicious post had been made on Lorraine's social media account using this mobile phone. It appeared that Christopher had sent strange messages to her loved ones. After the unsettling incident, whatever it was, he had taken Lorraine's phone. Rather than using it for communication, he inserted a SIM card into his own phone to access her contact list and social media account. This raised further suspicions about Christopher. He was the last person confirmed to have seen Lorraine alive, and his attempts to manipulate her account seemed suspicious. It became clear that he was trying to cover his tracks, raising questions about his motives that the authorities still needed to uncover. Christopher was arrested and charged with the kidnapping of Lorraine Cox. That same day, forensic experts arrived at his apartment to investigate. They used a substance called luminol to carefully examine the area. While they found several suspicious traces of evidence, the most alarming findings were in a nearby alley. During their search of the apartment, they discovered blood and numerous signs that supported the theory that Lorraine was dead, particularly around a garbage can. The forensic team speculated that Christopher might have disposed of evidence by throwing away the body. They searched the alley and found a large plastic bag inside one of the trash containers that contained human remains. However, it was not a complete body. Some parts, including the torso and head, were missing, making identification difficult. Consequently, the case shifted from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation, and the work continued. Detectives learned that on the night of Lorraine's disappearance, in addition to Christopher, 5 other young men were present. However, none appeared on the CCTV footage with Lorraine. These men likely entered the apartment to buy food or for other reasons, but their involvement needed further investigation. They could have unwittingly been present during the crime or could have assisted in covering up evidence. Notably, the group behaved very differently. Except for Christopher, everyone was cooperative and willing to provide information. Upon further investigation, the 5 other young men were found to be locals who lived nearby. Since there was no evidence against them, they were released. In stark contrast, Christopher was uncooperative, reluctant to talk, and often gave vague or confusing answers. He seemed to believe that the police lacked sufficient evidence against him, but they soon discovered that his real name was Azam Mangori. This revelation marked a turning point in the investigation, as detectives confronted him with the truth, signaling the beginning of the unraveling of his story. Azam claims that he changed his name because he was born in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where people who do not follow tradition can face severe punishment, including being stoned to death. As an adult, he left his conservative homeland but still lives in fear of being hunted down and killed. To avoid this dangerous situation, he began calling himself Christopher. He had been living illegally in the UK since December 2018 to avoid returning to Iraq. Azam also possessed a high-quality fake ID under the name Christopher Mayer to evade detection by immigration authorities. This explains why the landlord knew almost nothing about the man. He was very cautious, had not attended school or worked anywhere, and lived off odd jobs. However, the interrogation ended abruptly. After admitting to these things, he refused to talk about Lorraine. His previous admissions were not significant to the police. DNA testing confirmed that the remains found in a trash bin were those of Lorraine. In Azam's apartment, DNA traces and other evidence indicated that Lorraine had been killed there because Azam had failed to clean thoroughly. The police also discovered a large handsaw and replacement blades purchased after the crime. Other items found included a driver's license, a debit card, and a wallet, all mutilated. Nearby trash bins contained bloody clothing, Lorraine's phone, and a SIM card discarded in the sewer. Unfortunately, parts of her body were never recovered. Detectives analyzed the location data from Azam's mobile phone on the day of Lorraine's murder and the subsequent days when he disposed of evidence. This investigation led them to a location on the city's outskirts known as Tin Pit Hill. During the search, they found Lorraine's torso and head, which were not well concealed. Investigators noted unsettling details. A piece of clothing was stuffed into her mouth, and a patch of skin was missing from her back, possibly taken as a trophy by the perpetrator. Unfortunately, no other body parts were located, and the remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, complicating the determination of the cause of death. The forensic expert concluded that Lorraine had likely been strangled. Despite strong evidence of his guilt, Azam continued to deny his involvement and created false stories. He even attempted to involve banned organizations in the case. The trial commenced in spring 2021. Although he never confessed, Azam and his defense team significantly altered his narrative. He now claimed to have a normal orientation and stated that he encountered Lorraine when she came to his place late at night after a bar visit. He approached her on the street and convinced her to come to his apartment for some intimacy. Azam maintained that Lorraine voluntarily came to his apartment after drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He claimed that after trying those substances himself, he experienced severe distortion of perception and lost consciousness. When he regained awareness, he found Lorraine in the bathroom, unresponsive. He alleged that he saw a puddle of urine beneath her and believed she had overdosed. Azam attempted to perform CPR, but it was unsuccessful. In a panic and without knowing the emergency number, he sat on the bathroom floor next to her body. Hallucinations then began, and he claimed to see dark creatures emerging from her mouth, prompting him to shove a piece of his t-shirt into her mouth to stop it. He pushed the cloth in so far that it could have caused her to choke. Despite being in a state of panic, he managed to find and send a video he had recorded around the same time to a friend, where he appeared calm and even exhaled smoke into the camera. He explained that he filmed the video to help himself calm down. His behavior grew increasingly bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he decided to dispose of the body and planned to flee from his relatives. Naturally, this account sounded implausible, leaving him with no solid defense. According to Azam, he was unsure what he would do after Lorraine died and kept her body in his apartment until he decided to dispose of it. When his anxiety reached its peak, he chose to throw it away. He called a taxi to take the bag with the remains to a wooded area on the outskirts of Exeter. Prosecutors noted that he seemed to be obsessed with amputation, as evidenced by the precise cuts he made, which horrified forensic experts. It was clear he had researched this topic extensively and was well prepared. That evening, Azam tried to connect with people on an escort website, seeking companionship but was unsuccessful. Later, he saw Lorraine on the street eating alone and viewed her as an ideal target. It seems that Azam may have premeditated this murder to fulfill his dark fantasies. Even with substantial evidence against him, his trial lasted 5 weeks. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of murder and attempting to obstruct justice. He received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 20 years, which means he could be released at the age of 44. Lorraine's boyfriend, Ellie, experienced profound grief, stating that a part of him died with her. He lives daily with this pain and struggles against despair. Lorraine's father, Tony, organized a charity march to rally support for his daughter. Participants silently walked the route she would have taken from the bar to her home, a journey she never completed. In the aftermath, Tony became an activist advocating for more CCTV cameras on UK streets to help prevent and solve violent crimes. He also started to make regular donations to an anti-abuse organization based in the UK. Even after justice was served, Lorraine Cox's family remained uncertain about how Azam was able to lure her into his apartment. Security footage showed her following him willingly. Azam claimed that he engaged her in conversation and offered her alcohol and a banned substance, which she accepted. However, toxicology reports found no traces of banned substances in her system, and a forensic expert stated that she did not die from diabetes, suggesting that Azam's account might be false. Sadly, the truth about what happened in his apartment may never be revealed, as only Azam and Lorraine know what truly occurred. Some believe Azam exploited Lorraine's kindness by asking for help, and that she may have felt unable to refuse, ultimately leading her into a dangerous situation. In 2012, Kim Dorsey was 38 years old. She had earned a degree in civil engineering from the University of North Florida. As a certified general contractor, she owned her own construction company and also served as the director of training for the Quality Assurance Department at Inspection Depot. She lived in a beautiful home with her husband, Derek Dorsey. Derek, a firefighter with 20 years of experience, was well respected in his community. Kim appeared to be an incredible individual, and many believed she had an ideal marriage. However, no one can truly know what happens behind closed doors in any relationship, even one that seems perfect. On October 28, 2012, Derek returned home from work to discover a horrifying scene. His wife, Kim, was lifeless. He immediately called 911, telling the operator he was performing CPR but suspected she was already dead. When asked what had happened, Derek speculated that Kim might have harmed herself. Emergency responders quickly arrived at the scene, but Kim was pronounced dead. Despite Derek's explanation, the detectives quickly determined that there was criminal activity involved in the case. When Derek found Kim, he covered her body with a blanket. Later, when the medical examiner removed the blanket, the extent of the violence she had endured became shockingly clear. Derek told investigators that he had gone to work the previous morning, as firefighters typically work 24-hour shifts. He returned home around 8 a.m. on Sunday, October 28th. He explained that when he walked into the bedroom, he expected to find Kim in bed. However, the room, darkened by thick curtains, revealed a tragic sight. Kim was lying on the floor at the foot of the bed. By the time he called 911, she had already passed away. The autopsy determined that Kim had been dead for about 24 hours before Derek's call. At the crime scene, police uncovered significant pieces of evidence. Kim's wrists and ankles were bound with plastic ties. Nearby, investigators found a broken pool stick, a gun, and a knife, all discovered close to her body. Bullet holes were observed on the wall and in the bedroom doorway, indicating gunfire. The scene also showed clear signs of a struggle. In the kitchen, drawers had been pulled open with their contents emptied, as though someone had been searching for something. Oddly, unusual items such as remote controls and a keypad from a surround sound system were found in the sink. The front doors showed no signs of forced entry, though a ceramic dog statue near the door had been knocked over. Detectives were skeptical about the possibility of a stranger breaking in, tying up Kim, stabbing her, and beating her with a pool stick. The circumstances suggested that Kim likely knew her attacker, or that the person who entered the house had access without needing to force their way in. With this in mind, Derek became the primary suspect and was brought in for questioning. Investigators asked him to recount his activities over the weekend and to describe the nature of his relationship with Kim. He said that on Friday, October 26th, Kim went shopping for a few hours and they spent the evening watching a movie together. On Saturday morning, he claimed to have left for work at about 7 a.m. and returned home on Sunday around 8 a.m., as his firefighter shifts often required working 24 hours straight. He stated that he had tried calling his wife multiple times during the 24 hours he was at work, but poor cell reception at his remote station had prevented the calls from connecting. Initially, Derek's story appeared to align with the evidence. However, one detail raised investigators' suspicions. During the 911 call, Derek suggested that Kim might have harmed herself, despite his professional background as a firefighter. Detectives found it odd that someone with his level of training would fail to recognize the violent nature of the crime scene. This raised questions about whether Derek was hiding something or had been involved in the crime. When questioned about their marriage, Derek admitted that they had an open relationship, allowing them to pursue other romantic connections. However, he stated that Kim had stopped participating in such outside relationships years earlier, after the death of her mother. Since then, Kim had struggled with grief and sought professional help. She was also on medication that caused weight gain, affecting her confidence and leaving her feeling less attractive. Detectives are questioning whether Derek wanted to end this open lifestyle or if his actions were motivated by other factors. Marital infidelity and personal struggles can sometimes contribute to tragic events, so investigators are exploring whether these may have been connected to Kim's sudden death. Derek admitted to being in a relationship with another woman. Detectives wanted to investigate whether Derek might have had a motive to end his marriage with Kim. They questioned whether he might have gained financially from her death. When asked about life insurance, he explained that his wife did not have a policy. Detectives also examined relevant details, such as the time it would have taken Derek to drive from his fire station to their home, a 15-mile journey that would have required approximately an hour for a round trip. After interviewing all of his co-workers at the small fire station, the investigators confirmed that he had a solid alibi. The investigators then shifted their focus, exploring a different possibility. They were aware of Derek's girlfriend and pondered whether she might have had a motive. In love triangles, emotions such as jealousy or resentment can lead to extreme actions. Perhaps Derek had promised to leave Kim for his girlfriend but failed to follow through, leading to tension. However, investigators questioned his girlfriend and found that she had an unshakable alibi, ruling her out as a suspect. The detectives decided to revisit the crime scene for further analysis. In complex cases with unclear evidence, specialists like blood spatter analysts are often brought in to uncover critical details. Their goal was to determine the sequence of incidents, where the attack began, where it ended, and what might have happened in between. Experts concluded that Kim was initially injured near the bedside table, where the left side of the bed was covered in blood. She was gravely wounded and remained there for some time. Evidence suggested that Kim eventually regained consciousness and fought back. She managed to reach her gun, a 5-shot revolver, and fired all 5 rounds towards someone who was possibly standing in the doorway. Despite her efforts, none of the shots struck the attacker. Analysis of the bullet trajectories revealed that they were fired upward, indicating that Kim was either sitting or lying on the bedroom floor when she fired. Once the attacker realized Kim was out of ammunition, he re-entered the room with a pool stick and continued the assault, beating her until the stick broke. Breaking a pool stick requires substantial force, and forensic analysis showed that it shattered while striking Kim's body. The attack escalated further when the perpetrator stabbed her in the neck. A detailed forensic investigation uncovered key details about the crime. The pool stick, later identified as one of the murder weapons, was normally stored on the second floor of the house. Investigators also found that Kim had been restrained using plastic ties, which were kept in an upstairs office. Additionally, the knife used in the attack came from a set in the kitchen. These findings strongly suggested that the attacker was familiar with the home and its contents. Detectives concluded that the crime was likely committed by someone close to Kim who knew her well and had unrestricted access to the house. During the autopsy, investigators discovered injuries on Kim's body that indicated she had been forced into unwanted contact with a man before her death. This led police to obtain a DNA sample from the perpetrator. Based on information provided by Derek, it was possible that other men had been in the house while he was at work, which expanded the list of potential suspects. Detectives questioned Derek and asked him to provide the names of men who might have been in the house. In addition to being a firefighter, Derek also worked as a general contractor. Some of the individuals he employed through his contracting business had stayed in his home at various times. Derek mentioned two individuals of interest. The first was Lance Kirkpatrick, a former co-worker who had become a friend. Derek had allowed Lance to live in his house for a few months while Lance was going through personal difficulties, but he later asked Lance to leave after discovering that Lance was using a banned substance. According to Derek, Lance was on a boat in the Atlantic Ocean the weekend the crime occurred, seemingly giving him an alibi. The second person Derek mentioned was a man named Joshua. Derek had befriended Joshua, provided him with work, and tried to help him during tough times. Derek and Kim had allowed Joshua to stay in their home, but after a falling out, Joshua moved out. Despite this, Derek occasionally hired Joshua for jobs and was planning to meet him the morning he discovered Kim's body. Derek explained that on Sunday morning, after finishing work, he had been scheduled to meet Joshua at a convenience store to pick him up for a job, but Joshua never showed up. This raised a critical question: why would Joshua miss the meeting if he needed the work? This made Joshua a key suspect. The police discovered that Joshua had a criminal history, mostly related to prohibited substances. He was taken into custody and brought to an interview room, where a detective questioned him about his activities over the weekend. Joshua claimed that he had been partying at home the entire time, including during the period when the crime was believed to have occurred. When asked whether he had a romantic relationship with Kim, he denied it but admitted that he found her very attractive and wouldn't have been opposed to having one. Toward the end of the interview, the detective informed Joshua that Kim was dead. His reaction surprised the detectives. He began crying. However, they were unsure whether his emotions were genuine or staged. A DNA sample was collected from Joshua, and he was subsequently released. Forensic analysis later confirmed that the DNA found on Kim's body did not match Joshua's, officially eliminating him as a suspect. Meanwhile, Derek provided investigators with a list of individuals familiar with his home. All of them agreed to DNA testing and were eventually ruled out as suspects. Investigators decided to revisit the crime scene, this time walking through the house with Derek. During their inspection of the kitchen, they discovered 4 remote controls from the surround sound system submerged in the sink. It appeared that someone had deliberately soaked the remotes in water, likely to erase any DNA evidence. When Derek turned on the TV, it immediately began playing an adult movie, which he claimed was not his. This raised the possibility that the perpetrator had used the TV. He then remembered that another man had recently been in the house. On Friday afternoon, approximately 12 hours before Kim's death, an employee from the company that had installed their surround sound system had visited to fix an issue with the remotes. Derek suggested that this man might have returned to the house while he was at work. Detectives quickly located the employee and began questioning him. They noticed he had cuts on his hands, but he explained that they were work-related injuries, common in his line of work. He denied any involvement in Kim's death and willingly provided a DNA sample. However, his DNA did not match the evidence found on Kim's body, further ruling him out as a suspect. The issue escalated when a police officer reviewed a routine report concerning the temporary use of a vehicle. In simple terms, the car had been reported as stolen, even though the original owner had permitted someone else to borrow it. The theft report was filed only 17 hours before Kim's death. The car's owner, a young woman, reported the theft to the police. She identified the man she had allowed to use the car as Lance Kirkpatrick. Lance never returned the vehicle. His name had surfaced earlier in the investigation when Derek mentioned individuals who had been in his house. However, Derek believed that Lance was on a boat at sea at the time of the crime. The woman who reported the car theft told detectives that she, Lance, and several others had attended a party the previous Friday night. At one point, Lance offered to go to the store to get a drink, and she let him use her car. That was the last time she saw him. detectives began investigating whether the stolen car had been near Kim's home. During their initial canvassing of the neighborhood, a patrol officer interviewed one of Kim's neighbors. The neighbor mentioned seeing a small blue SUV in the area that day, matching the description of the stolen vehicle. Days later, detectives received new information and located surveillance footage. The video revealed a blue SUV parked outside Kim's home at 6:30 a.m. on the day she died. This footage immediately made Lance the prime suspect. To locate Lance, the police contacted the woman whose car he had stolen. While she didn't know his whereabouts, she provided information about one of his friends, Brian Kiefer. Detectives brought Brian in for questioning. They learned that Brian had also been at the party the night the SUV disappeared. He explained that he had been taking cabs all night to track down Lance, as he had also allowed Lance to borrow a car in the past. He eventually managed to locate Lance the following day. When Brian found Lance, Lance looked disheveled and had an injury to one arm. What Brian reveals to the detectives next is horrifying. Lance has confessed to Brian that he killed a woman and will go to prison. Lance admitted that the killing had been brutal and involved a beating. People confess to crimes for various reasons. One common reason is guilt. They cannot bear the weight of their actions and feel compelled to confess. Another reason could be the influence of alcohol or banned substances, which impair judgment and lead to unintended admissions. Lance provided Brian with details that only the perpetrator would know. For example, he admitted to attacking Kim with a pool stick. Lance also recounted being shot 5 times and expecting a 6th shot, which never came because the revolver only held 5 bullets. In this case, detectives had 2 potential suspects, Lance or Brian, since both knew specific details about the crime. Brian informed the detectives that Lance was hiding in the attic of his house. When arrested, Lance remained calm during the interview. He was questioned about his connection to Derek and the last time he had visited Derek's home. Lance claimed he had been there about a week to a week and a half earlier. He said that he regularly communicates, works, and understands Derek's schedule. He knew Derek would be away for 24 hours, leaving Kim home alone. Detectives questioned Lance about his relationship with Kim. He claimed there were no issues between them, but the interview abruptly ended when Lance requested an attorney and stopped answering their questions. With Lance refusing to cooperate, investigators had to find other ways to confirm he was at Kim's house. DNA testing became crucial. A sample was collected from Lance's father and compared to the DNA found on Kim's body. The results were striking. Not only did the DNA match confirm Lance as the killer, but it also ruled out Brian as a suspect. Detectives believe Lance's actions leading up to Kim's murder reveal premeditation. On the night of the crime, Lance borrowed someone else's car and returned later. He knew how to get to Kim's house, was aware of Derek's schedule, and knew Derek wouldn't be home for 24 hours, leaving Kim alone. He also knew the spare key was hidden beneath the dog statue. He retrieved the key to enter the house. At some point, Kim must have heard him, but what transpired afterward remains unclear. Despite the mounting evidence, Lance initially pleaded not guilty. Nearly 2 years after Kim's death, during the trial, Lance admitted he caused her death but insisted it was not intentional. He claimed he and Kim were friends, and she had been training him at the gym. According to Lance, they worked out 3 to 4 times per week and occasionally drank and flirted afterward, which led to occasional physical intimacy. Lance alleged that their interaction on the day of Kim's death was consensual. He admitted ownership of the adult movie DVD found at the scene. However, he claimed that after they were intimate, Kim became furious with him for introducing her husband to other women. Lance described how Kim, in her anger, grabbed a gun and began shooting at him. He said everything that followed was an act of self-defense. According to Lance, he ran and hid in the kitchen, where he had earlier left a pool stick. Fearing for his life, he grabbed the stick and swung it wildly to disarm her. He claimed to have knocked Kim unconscious, taken the gun from her, and tied her hands with plastic ties. Lance stated that he reconsidered tying her up, worrying how it would look to police. He said he used a knife to cut the ties, but during this process, Kim grabbed the knife, prompting a struggle between them. He alleged that it was during this struggle that he accidentally stabbed her. Overwhelmed with fear, he hesitated to call 911 and eventually fled the scene. He said that he had been frantic, did not know what to do, and had been scared. During cross-examination, the prosecutor highlighted inconsistencies in Lance's testimony and attempted to expose lies. In the trial's closing moments, the state pressed Lance on what punishment he believed he deserved. Lance admitted that he was guilty and added that he did not know what he wanted at that moment. In May 2015, Lance Kirkpatrick received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Although he could have faced the death penalty, the jury opted for life imprisonment after hearing his mother's emotional plea to spare his life. After the verdict was announced, Derek emotionally shared about the loss of his wife, Kim. Through tears, he said that Kim was not only a firefighter's wife but also a smart, strong, and dedicated woman. He affirmed her achievements, including graduating in civil engineering from the University of North Florida and starting her own business. In an interview, he expressed disappointment with the verdict and said he had wanted the death penalty. Geraldine Kriegel and Patrick Kriegel lived in Ireland. In 2006, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. They had a wonderful relationship. Even though they faced infertility, they did not lose hope. Both had successful careers, financial stability, and they wanted to adopt. They were waiting for confirmation of their documents. Finally, Geraldine and Patrick received news that a 2-year-old girl from Russia is available for adoption. Her name was Anastasia. She was born on February 18, 2004, in Novokuznetsk, Russia. Immediately after birth, she was taken to an orphanage because her biological mother was unable to provide for her. Anastasia spent her entire childhood mostly alone, as the caregivers primarily focused on more demanding children. This lack of attention resulted in her having difficulty expressing emotions. Geraldine and Patrick was overjoyed when they learned about Anastasia. They quickly developed a close relationship with her. On August 10, 2006, they brought her home, and this date became a family holiday. From now on, her name is Anastasia Anna Kriegel, affectionately called Anna. The day when laughter filled their home was the day that Geraldine and Patrick truly became parents. They wanted Anna to remember her culture, so they bought her a matryoshka doll. The once quiet life of Geraldine and Patrick turned into a fun adventure. Anna was daddy's angel and mommy's princess. They tried to diversify their lives as much as possible. They went ice skating and planned excursions every summer. They vacationed in Patrick's hometown of Annecy, France, where they had a house, and Anna made several friends. She always looked forward to this trip, enjoyed France, and even studied French. However, there were obstacles in Anna's life. She struggled with learning English, and her mother helped her because she wanted Anna to be able to communicate with her peers. Anna also faced challenges in forming close relationships and expressing her emotions. Time spent without adequate care in the orphanage led her to be uncomfortable with physical affection. Nonetheless, Geraldine and Patrick were able to help Anna overcome this emotional emptiness through their unconditional love, support. A nurturing environment, combined with educational activities, healthy eating, and sports, laid a solid foundation for Anna's future. Unfortunately, the girl also faced health concerns. During a routine examination, the doctor discovered a tumor in her right ear, which caused hearing loss, as well as partial blindness in her right eye. Despite these difficulties, Anna grew into an energetic and joyful girl. However, her hearing and vision problems made studying difficult, leading to poor academic performance in elementary school. She attended consultations with specialists until the 3rd grade in order to keep up with her peers. In her everyday life, Anna took her challenges to heart. This affected her self-esteem and diminished her desire to live in this world. One day, while walking home and enjoying the fresh air with music playing through her favorite headphones, she encountered 4 boys who blocked her path. They made fun of her, one even pinched her. Anna ran home in tears and told her mother. Geraldine and Patrick took this incident seriously and filed a complaint against the boys, informing the police about the boy who had touched Anna. However, he was let off with just a warning. Consequently, the parents decided to accompany Anna to school and pick her up every day themselves, but this led to more ridicule. She vented her feelings on social media, seeking acceptance from her peers. This situation deeply affected Geraldine. It was painful for her to see how unhappy her daughter was. Soon, Anna began to inflict physical harm on herself to drown out the emotional pain. The parents realized the severity of the situation and worried that their child might take more drastic actions. Geraldine's only wish was for her daughter to be happy. Finally, Anna began to show signs of improvement thanks to personal therapy. She made some friends with whom she had sleepovers, went for walks, watched movies, discussed boys. As Anna's high school education was coming to an end, on a sunny day, May 13, 2018, Geraldine wanted to help her daughter prepare for a test. On weekends, they usually did their homework together. Their hard work, that day they decided to take a break. They turned on the TV, made popcorn, and watched a movie while hugging Anna's cousins. Geraldine joined them and ordered pizza. The children played games while the adults sipped wine and enjoyed snacks, filling the house with a joyful atmosphere. May 14, 2018, began as usual. Geraldine got on the train headed to Dublin while Anna went to school. After lunch, she had an appointment with a psychologist. Patrick, who had retired by this time, took the opportunity to sleep a little longer. Classes ended at 4 p.m., and Anna called her mother, but there was no answer because Geraldine was at an important meeting. She wrote a message to her daughter, saying that she would call back soon. When Anna came home, Patrick was relaxing in the garden and heard the doorbell. A young man was standing at the threshold. He was the same age as Anna. Patrick was not expecting guests, and Anna was surprised to see the guy. Patrick had never seen him before. Anna's joy was obvious. She whispered something to the guy, grabbed her favorite sweater, and told her father that she would be back soon. Patrick reminded her that she needed to study, which she had forgotten because of the sudden guest. He saw them leave for the park. Patrick was not immediately worried since the park was only a 20-minute walk from their home. At 5:10 p.m., Geraldine returned home and tried to call Anna, but she did not answer. Not wanting to overreact, she thought Anna would be home soon. However, Anna did not return. Patrick told his wife that Anna had gone to the park with some guy. This was strange considering Anna's difficulties with communication. Geraldine immediately texted Anna, asking her to come home. When there was still no answer, it alarmed the parents, especially considering Anna's previous issues with bullying and her health problems. Concerned, Geraldine decided to go to the park, but there were no traces of Anna there. Geraldine and Patrick began searching the streets in their car, trying to find any signs of Anna. Their fear deepened when they realized they knew nothing about the young man Anna had been with. By their own efforts proved unsuccessful, by 9 p.m., they reported Anna's disappearance to the police, emphasizing that her lack of response to calls and messages was out of character for her. They also informing the police about the unknown guy. The police quickly tracked down the young man, whose name was Boy B. His family was surprised by the police's arrival. Investigators asked Boy B to describe Anna's whereabouts, and he said that they had walked together until 5:40 p.m. before he went home. After that, the police began searching for Anna. They combed the area and reviewed footage from surveillance cameras. Patrick and Geraldine provided photographs of Anna, including one in which she was wearing the black sweatshirt she had worn in that evening. Supporters gathered around Geraldine and Patrick, while the police carefully studied video recordings showing Boy B and Anna in the park around 5 p.m. At 5:14 p.m., they left the park through a different exit, but after that, Anna seemed to have vanished without a trace. Her disappearance became a mystery. Progress in the investigation was made when they managed to find a witness who saw Anna and Boy B walking through the park. Video footage captured Boy B walking alone through the park at 5:49 p.m. Under pressure from the police, Boy B admitted that he was with another friend named Boy A. Boy A liked Anna, and Boy B was acting as an intermediary between them. With this new information, investigators intensified their efforts and began broadcasting information about the search for Anna across all social networks, as well as in local newspapers. Simultaneously, they searched for Boy A. His backpack was found. Video footage showed him entering and exiting the park, but he had been absent for a long time. Some opinions suggested that Anna might have run away, but this theory was quickly dismissed. To resolve the mystery of Anna's disappearance, detectives organized a step-by-step recreation of the events that had occurred in the park that day alongside Boy B and Boy A, under their parents' supervision. The interaction between the boys raised the police's suspicions, so they were separated for individual interrogations. Boy B's testimony remained consistent. Boy B began the interview the previous day by repeating what he had told police the previous week, that Boy A had asked him to call Anna's house, in Leixlip, just outside Dublin in County Kildare, and bring her to meet him at St. Catherine's Park, so they could talk. And that he had left Anna with Boy A before going home to do his homework. During the investigation, police reviewed more than 700 hours of CCTV footage from the area around where Anna went missing. The detectives, Daly and Gannon, repeatedly told Boy B that the route he claimed they had taken that day did not match what was recorded by cameras in and around St. Catherine's Park, which is on the Lucan side of Leixlip, on the border between County Kildare and County Dublin. But Boy B stuck to his story, offering various explanations to police about the inconsistencies between the CCTV footage and his account. They said that, on a later occasion, they were attacked by two strange men, resulting in a fight where Boy A hit one of the men on the head. Both men ran away. He then showed the police the injuries they had inflicted, including scratches on his arms and legs and a cut on his face. These men could have been responsible for Anna's disappearance, so the detectives needed their descriptions. The police also seized the boys' belongings to conduct examinations for DNA evidence of the attackers. As the investigation progressed, police brought in specialized search units, including divers and a rescue team, to check nearby bodies of water. In total, 60 people were involved in the search for Anna, including volunteers and the Kriegel family. Anna's disappearance became a sensational news story. Her photo in a black sweatshirt became a symbol of her search. Near the park, there is Glenwood House, a derelict farmhouse designed by James Gondon in the 19th century, located in a town of Coldblow, west of Lucan. One of the eyewitnesses reported seeing young people and police entering it, so the police went there to investigate. The house was 2 stories, sat on 42 acres of land. It was in ruins, with the roofs and walls having collapsed. It is unclear why the police had not checked there earlier. They conducted a thorough examination of both the house itself and the fields behind it. The search began in the park, where they meticulously searched every bush before gradually moving toward the abandoned house. The police checked the utility room while the volunteers searched the main building. It was very dark inside as there was no light in the room. The policeman was taken aback by the pungent smell filling the room. Once his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized that in front of him lay a naked female body, next to which lay clothes and a broken telephone. On the floor, there were traces of blood beside a brick and a large branch. Judging by the clothing, it was the body of Anna. There were multiple wounds on her body, and her neck was wrapped in duct tape. Her hand lay as if she had been trying to tear off the duct tape herself. It was evident that she had fought valiantly for her life. Her naked body, wearing only socks, lay among broken bottles and garbage. Many questions arose about how this could have happened, who was responsible for this crime. Why was Anna in this building? This incident irrevocably changed the lives of Geraldine and Patrick. The death of their long-awaited and beloved daughter was an indescribable tragedy for them. The whole city learned the details of what happened, and most people were in shock. Glenwood House, located near the park where children had played peacefully, was now the scene of a terrible crime. An autopsy revealed that Anna had sustained about a dozen wounds all over her body, including bruises and cuts, primarily on her head, face, and neck. The cause of death was attributed to blunt force trauma to the head, as well as asphyxiation, indicating that Anna had been abused. Based on the traces of semen found, it remains unclear whether she was conscious during the assault. Her death occurred between 5:25 and 5:54 p.m., just a few minutes after she left the park. At the entrance to the building, she was struck with a heavy stick that had nails sticking out of it before being hit with a brick. Blood on the walls, and evidence suggested that the attacker dragged her body to the window, most likely to limit visibility for anyone outside. After collecting all the evidence, the police arrested two individuals. Boy B and Boy A, who were last seen with Anna, were suspected of the murder. In Boy A's backpack, a mask with the image of a zombie was found with traces of Anna's blood, along with gloves, shin guards, and knee pads. The semen found matched Boy A's DNA. Anna's blood was also located on his shoes and clothes. His mother believed he had been attacked and then washed his clothing. Boy A denied involvement in Anna's death despite the evidence found at the crime scene. No DNA was detected from Boy B, and there was no blood found on his belongings. During interrogation, Boy B admitted that he had seen Anna enter the abandoned house with Boy A but was unaware of his friend's intentions. Boy B wanted to approach the house but was frightened by screams at the entrance. He witnessed Boy A tearing off Anna's clothes and then turned to Boy B, his face reflecting the danger that prompted Boy B to remain silent. It later emerged that Boy A had shared his vile plans with Boy B. Both boys were released on bail pending a trial date, which angered local residents not only because they feared for their safety but also because the identities of the criminals had not been made public. Both boys came from respectable and successful families and had no criminal histories or psychological problems, which surprised the residents of the city. The hearing of their case took place on April 29, 2019. It was a closed hearing, attended by the parents of the defendants, as well as Geraldine and Patrick, who found the proceedings difficult but promised to defend their daughter to the end. The prosecutor stated that Boy B had lured Anna out of the house under the pretense of facilitating a meeting with Boy A, whom she liked, while Boy A took her to the abandoned house and abused her. The jury trial took place on June 18. Boy A was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Boy B was also found guilty in Anna's death, receiving a 15-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 8 years, despite the lack of material evidence. According to the law, their identities must remain confidential. If released, they would be given new identification. However, the harshest sentence was borne by Anna's parents, as Geraldine stated that life without Anna had ceased to hold meaning. Patrick died on June 19, 2022, haunted by the guilt of allowing his daughter to go with a stranger that day. The tragic loss of Anna Kriegel left an indelible mark on her family and the community of Leixlip. Geraldine and Patrick, who had poured their love, hope into building a joyful life for their adopted daughter, were shattered by her brutal murder. The conviction of Boy A and Boy B, though a step toward justice, could not fill the void left by Anna's absence. Anna's memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her. Alicia Bromfield was born on August 28, 1990, in Joliet, Illinois, to James and Sherry Anisic. She has 4 siblings, an older sister named Brianna and 3 older brothers named Luke, Chase, and Colton. Since childhood, Alicia has been known for her high energy and cheerful personality. Her family is very important to her, especially her mother and grandmother, who have always provided her with support and comfort. The loss of her grandmother was a profound blow to Alicia, leaving a lasting impact on her life. Even though she has experienced pain, she has never lost her joy for life or her optimism. She was an energetic child, always smiling and ready for new adventures. At school, Alicia was active and engaged, and she enjoyed spending time in nature. She graduated from Joliet Catholic Academy in 2008 and later pursued studies in criminal justice and forensic psychology at Western Illinois University. After Alicia's parents divorced when she was young, her relationship with her mother deepened. She primarily lived with her mother, and when her mother remarried, she felt genuinely happy, embracing the idea of a big, loving family, something she had always dreamed of creating for herself in the future. Becoming a mother was one of Alicia's most important aspirations, as she felt that motherhood was a significant part of her purpose. At 16, Alicia started working at Grand Flower Growers, where she made beautiful floral arrangements sold at a nearby Home Depot. She had a natural talent for design and loved seeing her creativity bring joy to others. This job is also ideal for a student like her, flexible, stable, and paid right away. However, there was a troubling aspect to her experience. Her supervisor, 35-year-old Brian Cooper, soon became inappropriately interested in her. What began as a work-related conversation gradually became more personal. Brian started pushing for a romantic relationship, which Alicia consistently refused. He was nearly twice her age, and his behavior was not only inappropriate but also unsettling. This situation was difficult for Alicia to handle. Brian was her boss, and she had to interact with him almost every day. She couldn't quit because she needed the job to support her college expenses. Alicia tried to remain professional and not encourage Brian to pursue her. However, he ignored her boundaries and continued to pursue her. She reported his behavior to the company multiple times, stating that he yelled at her when she rejected his advances, called her derogatory names, and spread negative gossip about her. He misused his authority by denying her breaks and assigning her extra hours to punish her for not reciprocating his feelings. Additionally, he spread rumors among colleagues, falsely claiming that she was his girlfriend. Despite these challenges, Alicia remained resilient. She continued to juggle school, her personal life, and a toxic work atmosphere for 5 long years. By the age of 21, while still working at Grand Flower Growers and still facing Brian's disturbing behavior, Alicia unexpectedly discovered she was pregnant. The father was a fellow university student, not Brian, but he chose to be uninvolved in the child's life. Although Alicia felt heartbroken by his absence, she was thrilled about becoming a mother and more determined than ever to create a wonderful life for her baby. Alicia couldn't quit her job because she needed to save money for herself and her child while finishing her studies. She was delighted to find out that she was pregnant with a baby girl, whom she named Ava Lucille, expressing her love for her daughter. However, she is facing trouble with her boss, Brian Cooper. Despite learning about her pregnancy, Brian became more controlling instead of being supportive. He coerced her into working overtime, altered her work schedule without prior notice, and threatened to terminate her employment if she missed even a single day to see a doctor. Although Alicia tried to maintain a professional environment, Brian continued to harass her. He made her run personal errands, including walking his dog, and threatened her job if she refused. Alicia felt trapped. She was about to become a mother, and every dollar counted. Quitting so close to her due date wasn't feasible. Unfortunately, when she complained to upper management, nothing improved. The only action taken was asking Brian to leave early and attend anger management classes, but he never attended those sessions. As the weeks went by, Alicia became increasingly worn out, both physically and emotionally. She decided to confide in her mother, Sherry, hoping that someone would finally listen and offer support. Alicia felt she had done everything right. She had filed complaints, stood firm, and remained resilient. Yet, no one seemed to hold Brian accountable for his actions. In August 2012, Brian confronted Alicia with a new request. He wanted her to attend his sister's wedding with him. Alicia immediately refused, as the thought of spending a weekend with the man who had made her life so difficult was unbearable. However, Brian was persistent and threatened her job if she didn't comply. Alicia felt trapped. If she said no, she risked losing her job at a time when finding new work could be very challenging due to her pregnancy. Unsure of what to do, she shared the invitation with her mother. Sherry advised her to quit the job altogether, but Brian reassured them that his request was simply a friendly gesture. He promised that the entire wedding party would be in the same hotel and that he would behave appropriately. This slightly eased Alicia's anxiety, leading her to reluctantly agree to attend while establishing clear boundaries. She made it clear that this was not a date. She was going as a friend and believed that there would be people around to support her if she felt unsafe. On August 18th, Alicia and Brian traveled to Wisconsin, planning to stay at Sand Bay Beach Resort. Alicia believed that Brian's family would be there and that she wouldn't be alone. However, this assumption changed as soon as they arrived. She found out that she and Brian were at a different resort than the other guests. In fact, they were entirely alone, no family or wedding party, just the two of them. This understandably made Alicia feel angry and anxious. She immediately texted her mom, saying they had an argument and were heading home. Her mother, Sherry, found this strange, since Brian was supposed to walk his older sister down the aisle, so they couldn't go out. Not long after, Alicia sent another text message to her mother, informing her that they had reconciled and decided to stay. In retrospect, the message seemed suspicious, yet Alicia had genuinely written it. Later that day, she even attended the wedding with Brian. There's a photo of them smiling for the camera, but what no one at the wedding could see was the underlying truth. Brian was once again pressuring Alicia to act like they were a couple. Alicia had made her point many times, but Brian continued to cross the line. With no one around to intervene, Alicia reached her breaking point. She was tired of the games, manipulation, and lies. All she wanted was to move on, focus on her baby, and leave Brian and this nightmare behind for good. Alicia made it clear that once the wedding weekend was over and they returned to Illinois, she would cut all ties with Brian. She no longer wanted awkward friendships or professional courtesies. She wanted to completely sever ties with him. And who could blame her? After years of unwanted attention and pressure from Brian, Alicia had finally had enough. However, she found herself stranded miles from home in Wisconsin without her own car. Since Brian had driven them there, she had no option but to rely on him to get back home. When Alicia told Brian that she didn't want to continue the relationship, Brian underwent a change internally. He didn't react immediately, but his silence revealed his mood. He felt angry and rejected. The situation worsened when he started drinking, further deteriorating his mood. After the wedding concluded, the tension between them was palpable. Alicia and Brian returned to the hotel where they were staying. Although they slept separately, Alicia did not want to share a room with him. If she had the choice, she wouldn't want to be under the same roof as Brian for another second. However, Alicia felt exhausted because she was nearly 7 months pregnant. She had been on her feet all day, not only because of the wedding but also due to Brian's constant manipulation. All she wanted was to get some sleep. They were scheduled to leave the next morning, and she just needed to hold on a bit longer. Brian, on the other hand, was struggling to accept reality. He realized this was the end. Alicia had made her boundaries clear, and he was losing control over her for good, which sent him into a downward spiral. While Alicia managed to fall asleep, Brian sat nearby, drink in hand, watching her. He remained there for almost 2 hours, simmering with rage and darker thoughts. In a final, desperate attempt, he woke her and asked once more if she would go out with him. Alicia's response was a firm no. That one word triggered a violent reaction in Brian. In a fit of rage, he attacked Alicia as she lay in bed, suddenly awakened by the assault. She fought back, crying out for her life and for her unborn child, but Brian continued. In a horrific act, he took both Alicia's life and that of her baby. It is truly unimaginable to contemplate the last moments of Alicia, just a few hours away from going home, when she was attacked by the man who had tormented her for many years. Tragically, the nightmare didn't end there. After murdering Alicia, Brian committed another vile act by taking photos of her lifeless body. Eventually, he passed out in the bathtub. The next morning, he tried to end his life but was unsuccessful. Instead, he got out, still wet, and walked to a nearby gas station. The employees stared in disbelief as he approached the counter to ask for a phone. When the 911 operator answered and asked who the criminal was, Brian replied, with unsettling calm, that it was him and that he had done it. The police quickly arrived and arrested him on the spot. Alicia's life, filled with love and potential, was taken far too soon. She deserved much more, as did her baby. During a police interview, Brian confessed to all the accusations against him. However, in a desperate attempt to justify his actions, he claimed he and Alicia were in a romantic relationship. He asserted that he wanted a serious commitment, but Alicia did not. He even went so far as to say he backed off when he learned she was pregnant with another man's child, which was a complete lie. The only true aspect of Brian's story was his motive. Alicia had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. When the investigation continued, the police arrived at Sand Bay Beach Resort and entered the room where Brian and Alicia had stayed. Inside, they encountered a heartbreaking sight. Alicia lay lifeless on the bed, covered with a sheet, with a pillow placed under her head. It was evident that Brian had staged the scene before leaving. Officers then had the difficult task of informing Alicia's family of the tragic news. When an officer knocked on Sherry's door, she instinctively felt that something was wrong. The officer delivered the devastating news. Her daughter and unborn granddaughter were victims of homicide. Sherry's life was shattered, and she was overwhelmed with grief and guilt for not being able to protect her daughter and for not intervening with Brian sooner. Despite the family's immense pain, the investigation did not end there. Scrutinizing Brian's history revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Alicia was not his only victim. Another female coworker had accused him of groping her, causing her to leave her job after filing a complaint. He had a troubling history of abuse, including an incident in which he restrained a former girlfriend who didn't comply with him. Police discovered multiple complaints that Alicia had lodged against Brian, yet management had taken little to no action. Brian had secretly installed hidden cameras throughout his home and even in Alicia's hotel room. Unbeknownst to her, Alicia was recorded during ordinary activities, such as walking the dog or using the bathroom. This invasive surveillance was also discovered in the hotel where Alicia spent her final moments. Brian's actions constituted a severe violation of her privacy. Despite the substantial evidence against him, Brian pleaded not guilty, claiming that alcohol impaired his judgment and that he wasn't fully aware of his actions. The prosecution countered this by highlighting that he had a clear memory of events, including his contemplation of ending his life afterward and his call to 911 to confess that it had been him who did it. They argued that Brian had premeditated the murder, indicating it was not an impulsive act. Despite the evidence, the jury in the first trial was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. A year later, in a second trial, the evidence was presented again, and this time the jury found Brian Cooper guilty of 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, one for Alicia and one for her unborn child. On July 27, 2014, exactly 2 years after the tragedy, Brian Cooper received a sentence of 2 life terms in prison. He is currently incarcerated at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, a maximum security facility previously known as Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Notorious killers like Jeffrey Dahmer and Ed Gein have been housed there, as well as Chris Watts, who murdered his wife and daughters. Brian will never be released. The loss of Alicia and her baby created a tremendous void in her family. Overcome with anger, grief, and a desire for justice, Sherry decided that Alicia's life should be remembered for more than its tragic end. She established the Purple Project, named after Alicia's favorite color. This initiative aims to support single mothers, the group Alicia was part of when she needed help. The project also offers grief counseling for parents who have lost a child. One of its key events, the Night of Hope, was held on the 12th anniversary of Alicia's death, alongside grief retreats and community initiatives designed to bring hope out of tragedy. Additionally, Sherry filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Home Depot and Grand Flower growers to hold them accountable for failing to address Alicia's repeated pleas for help. Ultimately, the companies were found responsible for the deaths of Alicia and her baby. This case serves as a harsh reminder that workplace harassment can have fatal consequences. While it's easy to advise someone to leave a toxic job, the reality is often much more complex. Alicia needed that job and its paycheck. Tragically, Brian Cooper exploited her vulnerability. Hopefully, Alicia's story will encourage others to speak up and compel organizations to take the protection of their employees more seriously. On October 24, 2019, 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard was reported missing by the Auburn Police Department in Alabama. Her family quickly launched a widespread search, and local authorities joined in soon after. Initially, some wondered if Anaya's disappearance was just a typical teenage escapade, such as partying too hard or being upset with her parents. However, such behavior was not characteristic of Anaya. Anaya Haley Blanchard was born on June 22, 2000, to Elijah Blanchard and Angela Haley Harris in Homewood, Alabama. Her father was a businessman, and her mother worked as a registered nurse. When Anaya was about 3 years old, her parents divorced but remained on good terms. Then, Angela married Walt Harris, a heavyweight UFC fighter. Despite her parents' divorce, Anaya built strong relationships with both of them. Over the years, she became part of 2 loving families, receiving support from her stepmother, Yeshiva Blanchard, and her stepfather, Walt Harris. Her older brother, Elijah Blanchard Jr., was also an important part of her life. From a young age, Anaya showed a strong maternal instinct, influenced by her mother's example. Her kindness made those around her feel loved and at ease. She was always willing to listen, help anyone in need. At 19, Anaya was a central figure in her family, bringing them joy and support. She graduated from Homewood High School, where she had a passion for softball. In 2019, Anaya enrolled at Southern Union State Community College to study early childhood education, with the goal of transferring to Auburn University to become an elementary school teacher. On October 23, 2019, Anaya and her brother visited their mom and stepdad. After dinner, they said their goodbyes and headed back to their college dorms. Around 11 p.m., Anaya dropped her brother off, continued on her way alone, as they lived only 10 minutes apart. She informed him that her phone battery was low but reassured him not to worry since she didn't have far to drive. Later that night, around midnight, Anaya called a friend, but she never returned to her dorm afterward. The next day, her family reported her missing to the police. One of the biggest signs that something was seriously wrong was that Anaya left her dog alone overnight. Her mother knew Anaya would never do that because she treated the dog like a child. Anaya's phone activity stopped at 11:47 p.m. The last location where her phone was detected was near the Clarion Inn on South College Street. A major search effort began. Anaya's parents appeared on TV, volunteers distributed missing person flyers, and search teams scoured the areas where she was last seen. This effort led to a breakthrough on October 25th, when her 2017 black Honda CR-V was found in an apartment complex in Montgomery, about 50 miles from where she disappeared. When the police examined the car, they found blood inside, significant dents and damage on the outside, consistent with a crash. Law enforcement stated that this damage likely occurred sometime between Wednesday and Friday night. Days passed without any news about Anaya, leaving her parents heartbroken. They frequently appeared on television in a desperate attempt, hoping it would generate new leads about her location. She was last spotted wearing a black dress and brown boots while driving her black Honda CR-V. To encourage more community involvement in the search, a reward of $105,000 was announced for any information about her whereabouts. However, despite the significant reward, the search efforts did not gain momentum, with very few solid leads being followed up properly. Let's piece together the timeline of events. On Wednesday, October 23rd, just before midnight, Anaya was on the phone with a friend. This was the last time anyone who knew her heard her voice. By Thursday, October 24th, a missing person report was filed with the Auburn Police Department. Late on Thursday night, her stepfather, Walt, shared a video on social media asking for help in finding his stepdaughter. As time passed, hope started to diminish. On October 25th, when Anaya's car was discovered with blood inside, her parents were filled with despair. A vigil for Anaya took place on Sunday, October 27th. Her mother mentioned that Anaya had been with a young man she had just met on the night she went missing. That's all she said. She didn't reveal how or where she met him or where they went. She simply stated she was with this guy she just met, but Anaya would never just leave with a complete stranger, Angela explained. On Monday, October 28th, police released surveillance footage of Anaya entering a convenience store at 11:21 p.m. to buy potato chips. By October 30th, over 60 agencies, including the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences, came together to form a task force in response to Anaya's disappearance. This prompted a large-scale search operation, which quickly attracted national media coverage. The main clue the police had in Anaya's case was her damaged car. The car showed signs of a crash, and blood on the front passenger seat was confirmed by the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences to belong to Anaya, suggesting she may have been seriously hurt. Investigators also found a bullet hole in the passenger door and shell casings in the left cup holder. Additionally, there was a strong smell of cleaning solution in the car. Despite these findings, there were no suspects or clear leads to follow, prompting detectives to examine the evidence more thoroughly. When detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the convenience store where Anaya was last seen, they noticed a black man loitering nearby. On November 6th, the Auburn Police Department released an image of this man, who may be important to the investigation. Detectives identified him and were waiting to interview him. He was described as a black man aged between 20 and 30, weighing around 200 pounds, and standing between 5 feet 8 inches and 5 feet 10 inches. At the time, he was wearing dark pants, dark shoes, and a camo hoodie with the word Vans in white on the back. Police reported that the suspect left the area in a silver or gray Lincoln Town car from the early 2000s. The following day, authorities identified the man as 29-year-old Ibrahim Yazid from Montgomery. Surveillance footage confirmed that he and Anaya were in the store at the same time. The video shows him purchasing alcohol while frequently glancing at Anaya. Later, he was captured on camera getting out of Anaya's car from the passenger side. Additional footage from another gas station showed him re-entering the car on the passenger side. After that, Anaya and Ibrahim drove away together. However, there was confusion about the bullet hole in the passenger seat being associated with Anaya's blood. Eyewitnesses reported seeing Anaya and Ibrahim talking near her car outside the store that night. One witness claimed she saw Ibrahim force Anaya into the car before he drove off with her vehicle. Detectives noted that the witness told a friend about the incident, but neither of them intervened to help her. At that time, he already had an extensive criminal record and was out on a $295,000 bond related to charges of marijuana possession, robbery, and attempted murder. By the age of 30, he had committed nearly every type of crime except for murder, including violent offenses. In 2012, he was accused of trying to kill 2 police officers by crashing into their car, and in 2017, he was arrested for aggravated assault on an officer. His background includes numerous assaults on officers, dealing synthetic banned substance, and involvement in robberies. In one attempt to escape, he crashed into a police vehicle. Despite this history, the court repeatedly released him on bail or imposed minimal punishments. In June 2020, Ibrahim Yazid was charged with the murder of Stephen Hamby, which occurred in 2018. He was also charged with attempted murder for shooting a woman in the face during the same incident. Despite these serious charges, he remained at large. Auburn police chief indicated that further investigation revealed Ibrahim was present at the location where Anaya was last seen, and he was involved in her abduction. There is no evidence suggesting that Ibrahim knew Anaya. She might have been a random target during a carjacking. Authorities did not rule out the possibility of further arrests and continued to search for any accomplices. An arrest warrant was issued for Ibrahim Yazid, who faced first-degree kidnapping charges and had a history of violent crime arrests. As authorities actively sought Ibrahim, they warned the public that he might be armed and dangerous. On November 7th, the police issued the arrest warrant for him. This followed the release of surveillance footage believed to show Ibrahim, which prompted a tip that led police to Pensacola, Florida. There, the Florida Regional Fugitive Task Force located him near an interstate exit around 2:30 a.m. Ibrahim was arrested and taken to the Escambia County Jail in Florida on first-degree kidnapping. He agreed to be extradited back to Alabama and was denied bail, as he was considered a fugitive wanted in another state. Anaya Blanchard's family worried that her cheerful and caring personality may have put her in harm's way, making her a target for criminals. She always brightens everyone's day and spreads joy. It's heartbreaking to think that this very trait might have led her into danger. She was so trusting, and someone may have taken advantage of that, her mother remarked in an interview. The family also rejected rumors suggesting that Anaya had plans to meet a man the night she disappeared. They reviewed her social media accounts and confirmed that she had only been in contact with family and her roommate. One of Anaya's last messages was a Snapchat to her roommate, stating she was with a guy she had just met. However, her roommate didn't believe Anaya wrote that message because it did not match her usual style. The investigation stalled until police arrested a second suspect, Antoine "Squirmy" Fisher, on November 22nd. A prosecutor later disclosed that Fisher assisted Ibrahim in switching cars and provided him with money to flee to Florida. Just as detectives were preparing to interrogate Fisher, the kidnapping case evolved into a murder investigation. On November 25th, police apprehended a third suspect, David Johnson, Jr., charging him with hindering prosecution. Eventually, the charges against Fisher and Johnson were dropped. County District Attorney Brandon Hughes chose not to disclose how Johnson was obstructing the prosecution, citing a gag order that prevents attorneys, prosecutors, and witnesses from discussing the case with the media. Fisher testified that Ibrahim came to David Johnson's home for seniors on October 24, 2019, between 5 and 6 a.m. He stated that he noticed Anaya Blanchard's car parked near some bushes at that time. Ibrahim reportedly told Fisher that he needed more fuel for the stolen vehicle. Fisher then drove Ibrahim to a gas station, where they filled a can with gas before going back to Johnson's house. Ibrahim mentioned he needed to get something, so Fisher drove him north on Interstate 85 toward Shorter. They stopped in Montgomery, where Ibrahim retrieved an assault rifle. After that, they went to a cemetery off I-85, where Fisher claimed he saw Ibrahim dragging what appeared to be two legs wrapped in a blanket. Ibrahim allegedly spent some time in the woods before returning to the car. By the end of November, hopes of finding Anaya alive had almost vanished. On November 25th, police discovered human remains in a wooded area in Macon County, located off County Road 2. Investigators found a skull with a bullet hole in it, along with clothing that matched what Anaya Blanchard had been wearing when she was last seen. They also found a lead projectile nearby. 2 days later, on November 27th, the remains were confirmed to be Anaya Blanchard's. An autopsy showed that she had been killed by a gunshot wound to the head. Consequently, the charges against Ibrahim were upgraded from first-degree kidnapping to capital murder. He is now facing 2 counts of capital murder. One is committing homicide in an automobile through the use of a deadly weapon while the victim was in the vehicle, and the other is committing homicide during kidnapping in the first degree. The preliminary hearing was postponed several times for global issues, but Anaya's family and the public remained hopeful for the strongest punishment for the man responsible for her loss. Ibrahim, who is accused of kidnapping 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard, appeared in court for a preliminary hearing on November 20th. His lawyer filed a motion asserting that Ibrahim was entitled to this hearing on the kidnapping charges, arguing that Ibrahim did not kill Anaya and only acted in self-defense when she threatened him with a weapon. The next hearing occurred in June, where Auburn Police Detective Josh Mixon provided testimony about the case. Defense attorneys questioned the prosecution's assertion that the crime took place in Lee County. After reviewing the evidence, Judge Russell Bush determined there was enough probable cause to proceed with the case to the Lee County Grand Jury. Court records indicate that Anaya Blanchard tried to defend herself when criminals attempted to steal her car. Although she was trained to use a firearm and capable of protecting herself, the experienced criminal was faster. As of March 6, 2023, Ibrahim Yazid had not yet pleaded guilty to any of the charges against him and remains in custody without bail. His trial has been delayed multiple times. Consequently, Ibrahim Yazid will remain in jail at the Lee County Sheriff's Office until he is either convicted or acquitted. Anaya Blanchard's disappearance and death received significant national attention. Her tragic case led to the establishment of Anaya's Law, which reformed Alabama's bail laws. Her accused killer, Ibrahim, was free on bail at the time of her death. In Alabama, the state constitution allows bail for all defendants except those facing capital charges. Ibrahim had been granted bail after being charged with kidnapping and attempted murder, neither of which are considered capital offenses. Anaya's Law broadens the types of serious crimes for which bail can be denied to include offenses like arson, burglary, domestic violence, aggravated child abuse, assault, robbery, kidnapping, human trafficking, abuse, torture, terrorism, and homicide. Under this new law, prosecutors can request a bail hearing, which the judge can either approve or reject. If the hearing occurs, the defendant has the right to testify, present witnesses, and cross-examine them. Prosecutors must show that the defendant poses a flight risk or a threat to public safety. The judge will then decide whether to grant bail. As of November 8, 2022, Anaya's law, known as House Bill 81, was approved by Alabama voters. Additionally, in June 2020, Homewood City Schools established a scholarship in Anaya Blanchard's memory, and a bench in Patriot Park in Homewood was dedicated to honor her. By February 2025, the Anaya Blanchard case had seen significant developments, with the trial of Ibrahim Yazid, originally set for February 3, 2025, being postponed for a third time to the spring 2025 Macon County Criminal Grand Jury session, pending a status hearing on January 30, 2025. The tragic disappearance and murder of Anaya Blanchard left an indelible mark on her family, community, and the nation, transforming a vibrant young woman's promising future into a cry for justice and reform. Anaya's trusting nature and devotion to her loved ones, evident in her care for her dog and her dream of becoming a teacher, were brutally exploited by Ibrahim Yazid, whose history of violence and bailouts underscored the serious flaws in Alabama's legal system. The discovery of her remains in Macon County confirmed the worst fears, revealing evidence of her courageous resistance to a seasoned criminal. Ibrahim faces 3 pending premeditated murder charges, reflecting the gravity of his actions, but the pain of Anaya's loss continues to affect her parents and brother. Her case spurred the passage of Anaya's law on November 8, 2022, empowering prosecutors to deny bail for serious crimes and prevent future tragedies. Commemorated through a scholarship in Homewood City Schools and a bench at Patriot Park, Anaya's legacy of kindness and resilience continues to inspire, reminding society to protect the vulnerable and hold accountable those who exploit them. The Lundy family lived a quiet life in Palmerston North, New Zealand, a cozy town with a pleasant atmosphere. The spouses' names were Mark Edward Lundy and Christine Marie Lundy. At this time, they had been married for 17 years. They almost never quarreled and had one child, a daughter named Amber. She was cheerful, sociable, and becoming a model student in her elementary school. Amber was also a member of the Scouts. The Lundy family owned a business, which Mark ran as the public face of the company, while Christine took on a significant portion of the administrative work. However, they chose a narrowly specialized activity that was not very popular. As a result, the business did not develop as they had hoped. Despite their stubborn efforts to invest and grow the business, they incurred losses, which ultimately left them with about $100,000 in debt. As their business prospects seemed bleak, Mark decided to seek alternative sources of income. In 1999, he purchased 2 plots of land in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand, about a 2-hour drive from their family home, where he planned to invest in a winery and grape growing. He hoped this new venture would support him, but unfortunately, that did not materialize. He missed payments for the land, and due to late fees, the new business quickly began to incur even greater losses. Mark missed several payment deadlines, resulting in interest penalties of approximately 14%. At the time of the murder, the Lundy family owed $140,000 in interest penalties. The final deadline was August 30, 2000, the day his wife and daughter were found dead. On the morning of August 29, 2000, Mark went to Pet One, near Wellington, about 150 kilometers from Palmerston North, to address some business-related matters and to sell a couple of kitchen sinks, which was a common task for him. Around 5 p.m. that same day, he checked into a motel in Pet One. Half an hour later, he called Christine, and they spoke for 8 minutes. She shared her plans of taking Amber out to dinner at McDonald's. After their conversation, she made another call to a friend and then left with Amber for dinner. Later, a receipt from the cafe was found at their home, but there was no further news from Christine. The next morning, Mark went to more meetings. He called Christine again, but she did not answer. After waiting some time and trying twice more, he found it strange that she was not responding. Normally, she would answer right away. Concerned, Mark decided to reach out to Christine's friend, but she seemed rushed and unable to help. At around 9 a.m., Glenn Wedgery, Christine's brother, went to Lundy's house to see Christine about his GST return. A horrifying scene unfolded before his eyes as he entered the house. He saw both Christine and Amber in tragic situations. Immediately, Glenn notified the police and Mark. Upon arriving in Palmerston North, Mark found that the road to their house was blocked by police. He was detained and told he needed to go with them to the station because his wife and daughter were deceased. Overwhelmed with grief, Mark could not believe what they were telling him and was visibly distraught. The officers decided that the news was too much for him, so they took him to the station in a patrol car. Once at the station, Glenn was already there. Glenn owned a small business and occasionally sought help from Christine with administrative issues. On the morning of August 30th, he first called Christine to confirm whether she was busy, but she did not answer. Knowing that his sister was responsible and unlikely to cancel a planned meeting at the last minute, he decided to go to her house. Rarely using the main entrance, and out of habit as a close relative, he entered through the back door. To his surprise, Glenn found that the back door was wide open, and it was suspiciously quiet inside. At first, he decided not to attach any importance to it. He walked inside and greeted the family, but no one answered. When Glenn walked around the house, he understood why he was being ignored. First, Glenn found Amber. More precisely, he thought it was Amber, because given the state of the body, it was difficult to identify the girl. She showed no signs of life. He checked her pulse and confirmed that she was dead. Glenn noticed how badly her head was disfigured. It looked like a bloody mess. Then, he found his sister lying naked in bed. Her head and face were also badly disfigured. Glenn immediately called the police. While waiting for law enforcement, he remained in the house, sitting at the kitchen table, not understanding what could have happened to his loved ones. When the police and paramedics arrived on the scene, they immediately assessed the scale of the attacker's cruelty. The scene showed that both Christine and Amber had been attacked with such fury that parts of their brain and skull fragments were found on the floor and walls. A large piece of brain matter was even found on the ceiling in Christine's bedroom. Judging by the position of the bodies, it seemed Christine had tried to escape, but the attacker caught up with her in the hallway and beat her to death with blows to the head from a heavy object. The house was carefully examined, and it turned out that only Christine's jewelry box was missing. The police had no clues. Forensic experts were only able to find a broken latch on one of the windows, suggesting the thief probably entered through it. Additionally, there was a small blood stain here, which seemed too far from the scene of the attack and was likely left by the criminal. Despite the fact that some valuables were missing, this crime did not appear to be related to robbery and seemed more personal in nature, given the severity of the attack. Mark was obviously traumatized by the news of his family's death. Even when he was brought to the police station, he still could not formulate his thoughts coherently. However, after a while, he calmed down and was able to communicate with law enforcement officers. He described in detail the last day of his trip on the eve of the massacre. He had a reliable alibi since he was in another city engaged in selling kitchen sinks, which was confirmed by numerous witnesses. Mark described his nearly two-decade marriage as a sincere and loving relationship, but admitted that he had not had intimacy with his wife for quite some time, which seemed like a serious contradiction. Mark was reluctant to go into intimate details about his marriage, as if he were hiding something. Nevertheless, during questioning, he admitted that to compensate for the lack of an intimate life, he periodically used escort services. While Mark was at the motel, he read a book, drank half a bottle of rum, called a business partner at 8:28 p.m., and then at 11:30 p.m. contacted an escort agency and used the services of a call girl. He left the motel early in the morning and went on business, and by 8 a.m., he was already selling sinks. Mark's first client also told the police that he had tried to contact his wife several times that morning, but she had ignored his calls. After Mark's interrogation, the police were almost certain that he was innocent. At least, he did not raise any suspicions. The only questionable point in his story was his regular infidelity, which he had tried to hide during the early stages of the interrogation. As a result, his behavior was attributed to guilt over his infidelity. Mark was released, but they did not remove him from the list of suspects, as further checks of many facts were necessary since husbands are often responsible for such crimes. Law enforcement agencies briefly mentioned that Christine and Amber had died from multiple blows to the head from a heavy object, something like a weapon or small axe. However, nothing like this could be found at the scene of the massacre. A later forensic examination allowed investigators to find remnants of Fleck brand paint in the victim's hair, and its color was identical to that which Mark used to mark his own tools in case he lent them to someone. After comparing these facts, the police began searching for something like an axe that could be on the list of Mark's tools. Mark confirmed that there should be an axe in the garage, but it was not found during the search. The tool had disappeared. The most suitable place to dispose of the weapon was a river flowing near the crime scene. Several groups of divers combed the bottom but found nothing. Despite this, the detectives were sure that Mark was not involved in the murder and that the criminal had simply used his axe. However, this belief was not universally shared. At the funeral of his wife and daughter, Mark was heartbroken. He cried during the entire service, could not even get up when everyone else did. He had to be escorted to the car because he could not walk normally. Many thought that Mark was simply overacting, trying to hide his guilt and confuse everyone. While Mark's family supported him in every way and confirmed that it was very difficult for him. However, the rumors proved impossible to stop. Everywhere Mark went, people looked for some kind of catch and tried to find a way to incriminate him. It got so bad that the police even had to hold another press conference at which law enforcement officers confirmed that Mark was essentially another victim in this situation, just like the deceased, so he was not considered a suspect in the murder. At the same time, forensic experts continued to collect information, and inconsistencies began to emerge. It turned out that a few hours before the murder and for several hours afterward, Mark's phone was disabled. This was contrary to the usual activity of a man who often received calls. Then a woman came to the police station, introducing herself as a neighbor of the Lundy family, Margaret Dance. The witness reported that on the night of that fateful day, she went to a choir rehearsal at about 7:15 p.m. As she was leaving, she saw a stout man running down the street, dressed in overalls, with light curly hair that looked like a wig. It seemed that it was a man trying to disguise himself as a woman. When the stranger ran past her, she recognized Mark. He ran by without saying a word or turning around. Margaret was sure that it was Mark, who should not have been in the area because of his absence, and all of this seemed suspicious. Following this statement, the police officers decided to check on Mark again. This time, they obtained a warrant to search his car, exposing the interior thoroughly. Mark admitted that he had driven it on the night of the 30th. Having analyzed the clothing found, forensic experts discovered two stains resembling blood, a large drop that belonged to Mark and a smaller one that belonged to Christine. However, the second stain was very small. Given the brutal nature of the massacre, the criminal should have stained much more, considering that the walls and even the ceiling were splattered with blood. Forensic experts suggested that the trace could have appeared on Mark's shirt before. Perhaps Christine accidentally cut herself while cooking and stained her husband's shirt. The other blood stain belonged to Mark and was much larger. In its center, forensic scientists found a small mucus substance the size of a grain of rice. They assumed that the owner of the shirt might have blown his nose into it but decided to conduct a more thorough analysis. For this, they invited an expert who used a new testing technique called immunohistochemistry. Based on the results, the specialist concluded that the mucus substance was indeed a piece of Christine's brain, which could not have ended up on Mark's shirt. Investigators suggested that these particles got onto the shirt via the jumpsuit, which had most of the bloodstains, that Mark simply disposed of the clothes by throwing them into a garbage container far from his home. It seemed probable that Mark was indeed near the crime scene at the time of the murder. After checking the chronology of events, detectives realized there was a 3-hour window for which Mark had no confirmed alibi. To accurately determine the time of death of the victims, additional tests were required. The forensic expert examined the contents of the stomach of the deceased, concluded that the time of death for Christine and Amber coincided with the 3-hour window that Mark needed to account for. To prove that he could have made such a long trip, the police obtained a receipt for Mark's gasoline purchase, then compared the amount of gasoline he used that day, questioned him in detail, and calculated the approximate mileage. However, it turned out that he consumed much more gasoline than was required for the trip to and from the city, about twice as much. All this did not fit into the overall picture and raised even more suspicions against Christine's husband. Now, detectives began to take Mark seriously as the main suspect in the double murder. According to investigators, after the massacre, he broke the window latch and stole a jewelry box. He also undressed his wife to confuse the investigation with contradictory details. Then, he disposed of the murder weapon, overalls, and the blonde wig he had been wearing that morning. After that, he went to a neighboring town to sell the stolen items while maintaining the illusion that the situation was normal. He even created a fuss and called his friend, asking her to check what had happened to Christine. In turn, Mark continued to insist on his innocence. The investigators lacked direct evidence: a jumpsuit, a wig, a jewelry box, and an axe. All of these were missing, making it impossible to take fingerprints. The detectives decided to verify their conclusions by independently driving the route that the alleged criminal should have taken in 3 hours. With great difficulty and constant speeding, they managed to approximate the time gap theoretically. Given a sufficient reserve of time and not wasting it, Mark could have dealt with his family. It was surprising how he managed to avoid being stopped for constant speeding on the way in both directions. The motive for the crime was still in question. After all, the Lundy spouses seemed to be a loving couple, making it hard to believe that Mark was capable of killing his wife and daughter. The detectives decided to investigate issues in the family's financial situation. As it turned out, on August 28th, the day before the murder, Mark received a notice that he urgently needed to make a payment for vineyard land, or he could lose it. He had only 5 days to do so, and the penalty for failing to comply was significant: $140,000, a sum the family did not have. On the same day, Mark suggested to Christine that they increase the amount of her life insurance policies from $200,000 to $500,000. They followed through, although there was naturally no reasonable justification for such additional expenses. A day later, someone dealt with Christine and child. All this seemed even more premeditated given the timing. When his wife and daughter died, the new policy had not yet taken effect. In fact, even if his bloody plan succeeded, Mark would not have received the expected payout. After Christine's death, however, the insurance company paid $75,000 toward the mortgage, but Mark never saw it. In February 2001, Mark, whom law enforcement initially supported, was arrested for the murders of Christine and Amber. He was denied bail and awaited the start of the hearing behind bars. The trial was scheduled for 2002. The prosecution claimed that he killed his wife and daughter for the insurance money, with his primary target being his wife. Amber became an accidental victim. He did not intend to harm her, but when the girl witnessed the murder, he was forced to take action. The jury heard the entire list of arguments and evidence against Mark. Unfortunately, the prosecutor's office lacked the murder weapon, but they believed that the evidence of his guilt was already sufficient to convince the jury. Mark, contesting the prosecution's claims, had his defense attorney argue that a loving husband would never harm his family. The lawyer pointed out apparent gaps and inconsistencies in the prosecution's tactics. After considering both sides, the jury deliberated for 7 hours. Mark was found guilty of double murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 17 years. However, the fight for his freedom was just beginning. Only the lawyers and Mark were dissatisfied with the verdict. They promptly began the appeals process, but 4 months later, the appeal was rejected and the minimum time for parole was increased to 20 years. Interestingly, at this point, Mark's support grew even more, contrasting with his initial situation after the tragic death of his family. The prosecution provided a highly questionable timeline that seemed far-fetched. In light of this, those who previously considered Mark a killer began to shift their stance. The 3-hour time frame in which the crime occurred appeared implausible, given the journey and the disposal of evidence involved. Even with a high speed of about 120 kilometers per hour, the police could only travel from city to city in approximately 1 hour and 33 minutes. It would have taken even more time to deal with 2 victims and dispose of the murder weapon, in addition to returning. All of this seemed unrealistic. To dispute the allegations, even a drop of brain matter found on Mark's shirt was scrutinized, as the method of analysis used was deemed too inaccurate. 7 years after the trial, an article was published about the tragic massacre of the Lundy family, detailing arguments that were previously unknown to the public. It meticulously refuted all the prosecution's claims, even questioning the words of the neighbor, Margaret. Some inconsistencies, including the time frame she provided, did not match the prosecution's narrative. At the trial, she indicated that the murders were committed the evening before a scheduled visit, claiming to have seen a man at about 7:15 p.m. She stated that at that moment there were 7 people standing near the takeaway food shops who should also have seen Mark in disguise. However, none of them saw him running around the area in a wig. The prosecutor insisted that Mark had changed the time on his computer and had cleaned the system, but later, upon inspection, it was discovered that the hard drive had, in fact, been infected with a virus that was randomly corrupting files. Mark simply didn't know about it yet. At that point, even a reanalysis of the paint found in Amber's hair failed to find a match with the substance that Mark had used to clean his tools. The defense insisted that the police had focused on Mark from the very beginning. All attempts to acquit him from the start were more likely made to divert attention, a way to gain trust. The authorities had several other suspects who did not even have an alibi, but they were simply ignored. Soon after the article was published, Mark's defenders filed another appeal and turned to the highest judicial instance in New Zealand. This became the last chance to acquit Mark. The preliminary hearings took place in 2013, and the lawyers prepared a strong case that provided answers to all the controversial allegations of the prosecution. Thanks to this, everyone began to seriously doubt Mark's guilt. His defenders even secured his family's bail after 18 months pending trial, and this has been ongoing for 12 years. The hearings began in the spring of 2015, and interestingly, the prosecution radically changed its tactics. The prosecutor's office completely reworked the timeline, claiming that Mark committed the murder at night after returning home from a visit with a call girl, giving him enough time to get home, have breakfast in a cafe in another city, and continue his business trips. According to eyewitnesses, he behaved quite calmly and was in a good mood. Some of the controversial arguments were discarded, while others were reworked to better fit the situation. The prosecution clearly did not intend to give up. Even new witnesses appeared. For example, a cleaner who went to Lundy House on the 28th said that she sensed a lot of tension between the spouses. The defense also intended to present compelling arguments. New technologies now allowed for a different approach to assessing evidence. DNA samples from 2 unidentified men were found under the fingernails of Christine, which did not match the materials belonging to Mark. Additionally, it was discovered that during the initial investigation, the police had ignored several compelling pieces of evidence. For example, dark hair found in Christine's hand clearly did not belong to her. 10 hairs were found under the right fingernail and 11 under the left. The hairs were sent to the ESR for testing in 2 plastic bags. The bags remained untouched at the ESR for 9 months and were then returned to the police in June 2001. After his conviction in 2002, Mark wrote to the police asking that all material relating to his case be preserved. The police ignored this request and destroyed the hairs in December 2003. Detective Inspector Mark Hercock, the lead investigator at the 2015 retrial, confirmed that the hairs had never been examined or tested. The lawyer provided a new theory, suggesting that the killer could have been Glenn, Christine's brother, the very person who discovered the bodies and waited in the kitchen for the police to arrive. He had explained the scratch on his nose as a mark from a domestic cat, which led the police to leave him alone. At that time, however, the police had searched Christine's brother's house and car. They used luminol and found blood stains in both, but did not investigate further, which could have belonged to the murdered women. Glenn's neighbor admitted that he had long suspected Glenn of the murder because he had witnessed Glenn trying to dispose of some clothes. During the hearings, the prosecution claiming that Christine's brother had unhealthy tendencies and had molested Christine, leading to the deaths when she discovered it. Naturally, by this point, the defense had lost significant arguments to support these theories, as a lot of time had passed and traces were no longer available. Another strong point for the defense involved communication with an expert who identified the brand on the shirt. According to him, he had worked in a laboratory not intended for this kind of analysis. The technique was completely new and untested, and he likely made mistakes. The defense argued that the stains on the shirt could have originated from a meat pie. New studies were conducted with the best specialists, but they all concluded that the sample was poorly preserved and unsuitable for analysis. The only thing they could confirm was that the stain was from human tissue, but its origin was unknown, hence, this evidence was excluded as unreliable. Margaret was also not invited to the courtroom, and her testimony was disregarded. The defense presented a new theory regarding what could have happened to Christine and Amber. They argued that shortly before the murders, the family began receiving threats regarding debts, suggesting that someone came to the Lundy house to intimidate Mark into paying them off more quickly. This argument sounded quite convincing, but the prosecution insisted that only Mark had a substantial motive to get rid of his loved ones due to mounting financial problems and fear of being exposed by his wife as a bankrupt. The increase in the life insurance policy right before the murders seemed suspicious to the prosecutor and could not be considered coincidental. The jury deliberated for more than 15 hours. After these hearings, many jurors hesitated and could not reach a consensus. The Supreme Court upholding the previous verdict, Mark was sent back to jail to serve the remaining 8 years of his 20-year sentence before he could apply for parole. However, the defense did not give up and attempted to file an appeal in 2017, which became possible after changes in legislation. They focused on the obvious errors in the investigation and inconsistencies in the prosecution's version, but the court confirmed the sentence once more. The Court of Appeal ruled that the mRNA evidence was new science that had never been used before or since and should not have been presented to the jury, but upheld Mark's conviction. This was the interim provision, the mechanism that allowed the Court of Appeal to dismiss Mark's appeal. Mark's lawyer, Jonathan Eaton QC, then argued in the High Court that Mark had been the victim of junk science, and in May 2019 he was granted leave to appeal to the High Court, based solely on the interim provision argument. On December 20, 2019, the New Zealand High Court dismissed Mark's appeal, stating in its closing that other evidence demonstrates beyond reasonable doubt that Mr. Mark murdered Christine and Amber Lundy. Mark remained unable to fight for his freedom until 2022 when, in August, he was given the right to apply for parole. He was hopeful for release, but the commission refused, citing that he did not provide a plan to address his aggression issues. He maintained that he had not killed anyone and had no anger management problems, making it impossible for him to create such a plan. Despite the denial, a retrial of the appeal took place in May 2003. This time, the counsel sought to understand what motivated him regarding his family. Mark again insisted on his innocence, stating he would rather die in prison than admit to something he didn't do. This only worsened his situation, as he was denied release and required to undergo rehabilitation for alcohol issues he had faced before his imprisonment. Mark's relatives supported him, understanding he could not confess to a murder he did not commit, as this would destroy his struggle for freedom that had lasted for 2 decades. However, he remains hopeful of ever being released and continues to insist on his innocence. In 2025, North and South journalist Mike White revealed that other forensic evidence, such as hair samples from Christine's fingernails, had never been tested. A scientist had found blood-soaked fibers on a window next to the door where police believed the perpetrator had entered the Lundys' home. Police had also sent these fibers to the Institute of Environmental Science and Research, but again, they had never been tested. Police could not explain why the fibers had never been tested. After another hearing in April 2025, Mark was pardoned after serving 23 years in prison. He is scheduled to be released in May. He will face a variety of restrictions including a ban on online dating, social media, and media interviews. He will be required to notify his probation office of any relationships or employment. The tragic case of the Lundy family remains one of New Zealand's most controversial and polarizing criminal cases. After over 2 decades of legal battles, Mark Lundy's pardon in April 2025, following 23 years of imprisonment, marked a significant turning point. The untested forensic evidence, such as the hair samples and blood-soaked fibers, raised serious questions about the integrity of the original investigation and the reliability of the evidence used to convict him. While some continue to believe in Mark's guilt, citing the financial motive and the timing of the insurance policy increase, others argue that the prosecution's case was built on circumstantial evidence and flawed science, leaving room for reasonable doubt. Mark's release, accompanied by strict probation conditions, reflects the ongoing tension between justice and uncertainty in this case. As he steps into a new chapter of his life, the unresolved questions surrounding the deaths of Christine and Amber Lundy continue to haunt those seeking the truth.
That night, Brittany Steyer enjoyed a laugh-filled evening with friends. Now, she just needed to pick up her kids and return home. Her best friend sat with her in the passenger seat, both feeling a bit uneasy as they drove along the dark roads of Florida. Upon arriving at the small trailer, something felt off. There were people outside, empty beer cans scattered around, and an unsettling tension hung in the air. Brittany tried to remain calm, but in just a few minutes, everything would take a disastrous turn. What happened next would change their lives forever. Brittany Steyer was born on June 10, 1989, in the small city of Stuart, Florida. She grew up nearby in Port St. Lucie, where she was raised by her parents, Betsy and Joseph, along with her older sister, Christina. Betsy, who is a minister, later founded her own church, while Joseph had a successful career at a development company. Although Brittany's parents divorced when she was around 5 years old, they worked hard to co-parent effectively, allowing both daughters to spend time with each parent without feeling conflicted. From a young age, Brittany's cheerful personality and kind spirit were apparent. As a teenager, she spent her summers volunteering at a church camp, where she was well known for organizing dance competitions, acting in skits, and participating in talent shows. Her confidence and ability to inspire others were clear from these early experiences. In her early 20s, Brittany began her job as a cashier at a Winn-Dixie grocery store. Her strong work ethic and charming personality quickly caught the attention of her supervisors, allowing her to advance rapidly. She went from cashier to front-end manager, and then to grocery manager, where she oversaw both the grocery and produce departments. During this period, Brittany's life changed when she met Edward McNeil Harris Jr., a 28-year-old worker at a local Burger King. Edward had 5 children from 2 previous relationships, making him seem like a complicated choice for Brittany. However, her caring nature attracted her to him. She accepted his children wholeheartedly, treating them as her own. Despite her enthusiasm, friends were concerned from the start. Heather Helms, one of Brittany's close friends, felt uneasy after a brief meeting with Edward while picking up food at Burger King. She sensed something was wrong. Heather's worries increased after discreetly asking her husband, a police officer, about Edward. His immediate and serious response was a warning for Brittany to stay away from him. Alarmed, Heather attempted to warn Brittany, but her advice was ignored. Brittany passionately defended Edward, believing that others didn't understand the connection they shared. Although a little worried, Brittany quickly grew closer to Edward. She admired him for bringing joy to her life and for understanding her adventurous spirit. This connection made it easy for her to ignore the warning signs and focus on the positives she saw in him. By early 2016, just a few months into their relationship, Brittany discovered she was pregnant. This news filled her with excitement, and she wholeheartedly embraced the idea of becoming a mother, viewing it as the beginning of a beautiful new chapter. Unfortunately, her happiness was soon overshadowed by a tragic event. Brittany went into premature labor at just 5 months, initiating a series of events that would drastically change her life. In the hospital, Brittany faced an incredibly difficult situation. As a first-time mother, she felt overwhelmed and scared. She desperately needed support. She called her sister Christina, who rushed to be with her, but Edward was nowhere to be found. Christina frantically tried to contact Edward by calling his phone, driving to his trailer, and knocking on doors. Hours passed, but Edward did not show up. Tragically, Brittany miscarried her daughter. This loss was devastating, and Edward's absence during this critical time revealed an alarming side of him that Brittany could no longer ignore. It contrasted sharply with the image she had tried to maintain. Yet, following a familiar pattern, Brittany chose to forgive Edward. She held on to hope and continued with the relationship. In March 2016, Brittany moved to Bradenton to live with her father, seeking a fresh start and an opportunity to heal from her past. This move allowed her to begin rebuilding her life, and she quickly found a job as a salesperson at a sign company where her father worked. Despite the distance, Brittany maintained a close relationship with Edward, making the 6-hour drive to see him most weekends and paid all her own travel expenses. This pattern established a one-sided investment in their relationship, with Brittany giving much more than she received. By 2017, Brittany grew weary of the strain of their long-distance relationship and encouraged Edward to move to Bradenton. She found him an apartment and helped him secure a job with her brother-in-law's appliance installation company. However, problems arose quickly. Despite Edward's ability to perform the job, his temper led to conflicts with colleagues and warnings from his employer. As they tried to adjust to their new life together, their issues deepened, and Brittany's once vibrant spirit began to fade. Her co-workers noticed she became quieter and more withdrawn. To hide her discomfort, she started wearing long sleeves and pants even in Florida's hot summers. When people inquired about her appearance, she dismissed it with shallow excuses, preventing anyone from getting close enough to uncover the truth. Brittany's family noticed significant changes in her life. Her mother and stepfather, who had met Edward early in their relationship, recognized his controlling behavior. They saw how Brittany worked several jobs to keep the household running, while Edward contributed very little and demanded a lot from her. Brittany poured all her energy, finances, and love into the relationship, while Edward continued to take until she was left with very little. Her mother later reflected that Brittany, who had been raised to love unconditionally and see the good in others, believed she could help fix Edward's flaws. She thought that if she loved him enough, she could change him. Then, Brittany found out she was pregnant. This brought a mix of joy and anxiety. She was excited about becoming a mother again, but was also quietly scared of what lay ahead. Her fears grew when she attended a family gathering with a dark bruise under her eye, which she tried to hide with makeup. When asked about it, she claimed it was from a fall in the shower, offering the excuse with a forced smile. In 2018, Brittany gave birth to a baby boy. For a brief moment, they felt happy, and their little family seemed complete. Just 3 months later, Brittany discovered she was pregnant again. Although the news was surprising, she embraced it with her usual hopefulness and eagerly began preparing for the new baby. In February 2019, she welcomed a daughter. With 2 young children and a new, bigger apartment, Brittany seemed to be creating the life she always desired. However, beneath the surface, the emotional abuse from Edward was getting worse. Brittany felt trapped. She noticed disturbing changes in her son's behavior. He would sometimes act aggressively, imitating the violence he had seen at home, but then quickly seek comfort. This was a painful sign of the turmoil in their lives. The reality hit Brittany hard. By staying in the situation, she was not only harming herself but also putting her children in a dangerous environment. As a mother who loved deeply, this was a price she could no longer accept. On January 31st, 2020, Brittany made a pivotal decision. That morning, Edward, who was off work, announced he would be going out with friends around 10 or 11 a.m. Brittany didn't protest. Instead, she silently packed her things into plastic bags, loaded them into her car, and drove away. She called her sister Christina and asked to meet in Orlando for a trip to Disney World. While it seemed like a spontaneous vacation for the children to enjoy, it also marked Brittany's first genuine effort to break free and restore a sense of normalcy for herself and her kids. After the weekend, Brittany faced the reality of her situation. She realized she couldn't return to her old life and decided to contact her parents, asking if she could move back in with them. This decision was a step towards becoming independent, but it also posed significant risks. Edward, not wanting to lose her, bombarded her with calls and messages, pleading, apologizing, even making threats, using every possible strategy to win her back. Leaving an abusive relationship is often the most perilous time for a victim, and unfortunately, Brittany's experience would confirm this risk. On February 11, 2020, Brittany went to the Sarasota Police Department to report an incident involving Edward. She recounted a frightening situation that had occurred just a few days earlier. After ending their relationship, Brittany agreed to meet Edward briefly to collect her belongings from their apartment. What was supposed to be a short and friendly exchange turned into a nightmare. Inside the apartment, Edward held Brittany at gunpoint for several hours. He threatened to kill her and their children, describing horrific scenarios in which he would harm them, then take his own life. The fear that Brittany experienced during those hours was unimaginable, and it was even more heartbreaking that her young children were forced to witness it all. After her report, Edward was arrested at the Sarasota Police Department. He refused to answer any questions and requested an attorney. He was then booked into the Sarasota County Jail on serious charges: aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and illegal possession of a firearm, which is particularly severe given his prior felony conviction. For Brittany, Edward's arrest should have signaled the start of a safer life. However, she made the heartbreaking decision, which is common among abuse survivors, to drop the charges. This choice was influenced by promises from Edward's family that he would undergo therapy and that they would supervise his treatment. Brittany struggled with her feelings of fear and compassion. She later told her father that she couldn't stand the idea of their children growing up without their father, even if it meant Edward would be imprisoned for life. Driven by hope, her decision ultimately brought no reward. In the following months, Brittany dedicated herself to rebuilding her life. She prioritized her children, worked diligently, and started reconnecting with friends she had lost touch with during her relationship with Edward. Her posts on Facebook reflected her journey of self-discovery, showing her smiling, attending events. It was evident to everyone that Brittany was healing. However, Edward was still a presence in her life. Despite everything that had happened, Brittany allowed him limited contact with the children because she wanted them to maintain a relationship with their father, even if it meant being cautious herself. Edward continued to apologize, make promises, and manipulate the situation to try to draw Brittany back in. On July 18, 2020, Brittany went to Crawfordville for a friend's engagement party, excited to be the maid of honor. She left her children with Edward, intending to pick them up the next day. For a while, she enjoyed the festivities, laughing and celebrating with friends who were delighted to see her happy again. However, as the night progressed, she received a message from Edward demanding that she come to pick up the children immediately. Instantly, Brittany's expression changed from joy to tension and worry. She turned to her friend Heather for support and asked her to accompany her to get the children. Neither of them could have foreseen what would happen next. The drive was filled with tension. Brittany, usually cheerful, was now visibly anxious and silent. They arrived at Edward's trailer around 10:30 p.m., where darkness surrounded the property except for the light from their van's headlights. As Brittany parked in the driveway, they noticed a group of people gathered near an above-ground pool, with beer cans, empty bottles scattered on a makeshift table, indicating a party was in full swing. Brittany went to the trailer door, and Edward opened it, holding their infant daughter. With Brittany's little boy following her, everything seemed calm at first. Heather, sitting in the passenger seat, saw Brittany take the baby and start buckling her into the car seat. Then everything changed. Suddenly, Edward pulled out a gun. A gunfire shattered the quiet night. Acting on instinct, Heather jumped into the driver's seat while the side door of the van was still open. She could hear the children screaming in the back. In a panic, she put the van in reverse and sped down the dirt road, desperate to find safety. A few moments later, she pulled over, made a frantic 911 call, her voice shaking. In the midst of the chaos, she tried to explain what had happened. Brittany had been attacked. The children were with her. They had escaped for their safety. Meanwhile, Edward fled in his car. Police units quickly identified a green car speeding away after Heather's call. They began a chase. Edward drove wildly, zigzagging through parking lots and reversing on roads, as if he was unsure of where to go. The pursuit ended when Edward pulled over near Spring Creek Highway. He did not resist as officers approached and arrested him. Detectives returned to the location where Brittany had fled and found Brittany's body on the ground near a trailer. She had been shot 3 times. Next to her body, they discovered an abandoned baby bottle, a heartbreaking symbol of the 2 young children now without their mother. The news of Brittany's murder devastated her family and shocked the entire community. It was difficult for everyone to reconcile the memory of the caring, lively woman they knew with the brutal reality of her death. In the weeks that followed, more disturbing information came to light. Investigators found that earlier that evening, Edward had sent Brittany a series of aggressive text messages. He demanded intimate from her as compensation for taking care of the children during the bridal shower. When Brittany did not respond as he wished, his messages became angrier, revealing a dangerous and escalating rage that ultimately led to murder. Edward M. Harris Jr. was charged with first-degree murder, child neglect, fleeing from law enforcement, and possession of a firearm as a convicted felon. His trial started on December 16, 2022. Despite the defense's attempts to create doubt, the evidence against him was substantial. Text messages, witness testimonies, surveillance footage, and forensic findings all supported the same conclusion. On December 21, 2022, the jury reached its verdict, Edward guilty on all counts. Edward was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, along with 3 consecutive 15-year sentences for the other charges. For Brittany's family, the verdict provided some justice, but no punishment could bring Brittany back. Her children would grow up without their mother, and her family would forever feel the impact of her absence. Brittany's story serves as a stark reminder of the hidden struggles faced by victims of domestic violence and the tragic consequences when their pleas for help go unanswered. Both of Brittany's children were adopted by Brittany's sister, Christina. Edward is currently serving his sentence at Century CI, which is part of the Florida Department of Corrections. Although he retains visitation rights, he has no chance of parole.
Elias Otero was born on November 19, 1996, in Albuquerque, New Mexico's largest city. He was the first child of Louise and Alicia Otero, a hardworking couple whose biggest dream was to create a loving family. Eventually, their wish came true when they welcomed 4 more children. Elias grew up in a warm environment, surrounded by his siblings, including his younger sister Nika, who is 4 years his junior. From a young age, Elias demonstrated courage and responsibility. He always intended to protect those around him and made an effort to do the right thing. In high school, Elias's outgoing personality helped him make many friends and made his parents proud. Despite his love of playing video games and having a vibrant social life, he is also a good student and has a good sense of humor, which makes him very popular with his friends. When it was time to choose a career, he decided to pursue law enforcement, driven by his protective instincts. His family was not surprised by this choice, as he was known for his calm demeanor and commitment to justice. His ability to maintain order and respect in various situations set him apart, and his mother, Alicia, often relied on him for support, knowing he could handle challenges maturely. Elias's respectful and gentle nature distinguished him, embodying values that were increasingly rare among his peers. By late 2020, he graduated as a corrections officer and began working at the Albuquerque Penitentiary. At just 24 years old, he had a bright future marked by professional achievements and a recent engagement. As he prepared for his wedding and started his new life with his fiancée, Elias remained close to his parents and siblings, maintaining close family ties. On the evening of February 10, 2021, everything changed for the family. The day started normally, but the incident took a terrifying turn. That night, Nicholas Otero, Elias' younger brother, contacted an 18-year-old girl named Annabella Dukes via the Snapchat app. Captivated by her beauty and personality, Nicholas quickly felt a strong attraction to her. During their brief chat, Anna suggested they meet in person that very night. Excited by the idea, Nicholas agreed and went to pick her up at the address she provided. Driving his red Lexus, Nicholas felt confident and energized. Leaving the house late at night was common for him, so his family was not worried when he left. When he arrived to meet Anna, her beauty was even more striking than he had imagined. She suggested they go to a park in the city center for a more private setting. However, during the drive, Nicholas began to sense something was off. Anna made curious comments about his diamond-studded necklace and asked how much it cost. She also inquired if he had a weapon or cash in the car, making him uncomfortable. Despite his unease, he decided to continue the evening, hoping things would improve at the park. Once they arrived at the park, Nicholas noticed that Anna's phone showed an active call, indicating that someone might be listening to them. Before he could react, another car pulled up behind them, and 3 armed men got out. The situation escalated quickly as the men forced Nicholas out of his car. In the chaos, one of them even suggested using his weapon against him. Fortunately for Nicholas, the attackers only searched his vehicle. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that Anna had betrayed him. Moments later, he saw her talking to the men as if they were close friends. His feeling of humiliation increased as he realized that Anna was romantically involved with one of them. The young man, Adrian Avila, was only 17 but appeared to be the leader of the group. After they took Nicholas's diamond necklace, credit cards, and some cash, he thought it was over, but it was just the beginning. The group was not satisfied and wanted more. They forced Nicholas back into his car, with one of the attackers taking the driver's seat while the others split between Nicholas's car and their own, holding him at gunpoint. They instructed Nicholas to call his older brother, Elias, asking for $11,000 and a gun in exchange for his release, threatening to kill him if he didn't comply. Driving at high speed toward Nicholas's family home, the group believed they were in control. However, Elias, who had been awakened by Nicholas's urgent call, quickly took command of the situation. After alerting his siblings about the danger, he reassured them that he would protect them from the criminals. When the attackers arrived, Elias confronted them without hesitation while armed. He stepped outside to face them, but the situation escalated quickly. Adrian reacted faster than Elias, shooting him fatally. The scene became even more traumatic as Elias's family watched in horror while the tragedy unfolded. The attackers fled, 2 on foot and 2 in a car, while Nicholas seized the opportunity to escape and sought safety around 2:20 a.m. One of Elias's younger sisters called emergency services to report her brother's severe injuries. Meanwhile, their father, Louise, was abruptly awakened by his phone. The call from his daughter brought devastating news. Overwhelmed with sorrow, he struggled to explain the situation to Alicia, Elias's mother, who rushed to their son's side. They arrived at the scene in under 5 minutes, only to find Elias lying on the pavement. It was unclear if he was still alive, but the sight of his immobile body shattered their hearts. Paramedics arrived shortly after the incident, but it was too late. Elias Otero, only 24 years old, was pronounced dead that tragic morning. His mother, Alicia, couldn't stop questioning why this had to happen to her eldest son, who had always steered clear of trouble, bad influences, and banned substances. While the family struggled to cope with their loss, police discovered 3 handguns and a rifle near Elias's body. They explained to officers that Nicholas had shown up with 3 armed men who were threatening him. Later that night, a shaken and tearful Nicholas returned, burdened by the grief of losing his brother, whom he had admired, and overwhelmed by guilt for unintentionally putting his brother in danger. Authorities have opened an investigation to hold the criminals accountable. Detectives canvassing the area found Nicholas's abandoned and damaged car a few blocks from the crime scene. An autopsy revealed that Elias had been struck by 5 fatal bullets. As part of the investigation, Nicholas detailed the traumatic incident to the authorities. Despite the emotional strain, he was motivated by a strong desire for justice for his brother. He shared everything he remembered, including a brief online conversation with Anna, who was connected to the incident. After the crime, Anna texted Nicholas, claiming she was fleeing from the 3 dangerous men and insisted she didn't know them and had nowhere to go. However, neither Nicholas nor the detectives found her claims credible. A few days after Elias's funeral, his fiancée bravely spoke to the media about the man she had hoped to spend her life with. In interviews, she described him as having a big heart and being deeply devoted to family and friends. She and his family tried to understand why such a tragedy happened to such a good man. Their only hope was for justice to be served. The tragic case profoundly impacted the Albuquerque community, leaving residents feeling shocked, angry, sad, and frustrated. Additionally, Elias's death heightened public distrust of the legal system. Elias's family, in particular, became increasingly disheartened as investigators kept details about the case private to protect the investigation. This lack of communication created uncertainty about whether the perpetrators would ever be brought to justice. Meanwhile, police were quietly investigating to identify the suspects, focusing on Anna's social media activities. They discovered she had been in contact with another man the night before Elias's murder. Anna and her accomplice had previously used social media to lure Nicholas. They had robbed him of his car but left him unharmed. They planned to use that stolen vehicle for a larger target. Based on this information, police have stepped up efforts to find the 3 other people involved. The first suspect arrested was Adrian, who was found to have played a key role in the crime. His history was troubling, as he had previously been involved in a 2020 homicide where a 16-year-old boy was shot and killed. Despite the seriousness of that case, a judge allowed Adrian to be released on bail, requiring only that he wear a GPS monitor. In December 2021, just before Christmas, a warrant was issued for Adrian's arrest. He turned himself in on December 27th and was charged with open murder, kidnapping, 2 counts of armed robbery with a deadly weapon, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. After his initial court appearance, Alicia expressed relief about the case's progress in a local news interview. She remembered how she and her husband cried upon hearing about Adrian's arrest. She promised to advocate for her son during his funeral, which became her source of strength. Meanwhile, Anna was still on the run. The Albuquerque Police Department shared her photo with the community, asking for assistance in locating her. Anna's legal situation became increasingly dire, and her involvement in the crime made her a fugitive. Alicia publicly appealed for help, urging anyone who saw Anna to reach out to Crime Stoppers, a program that allows anonymous tips regarding criminal activity. She labeled Anna as dangerous and a threat to society. In response, Crime Stoppers offered a $2,500 reward for information leading to Anna's arrest. However, the police did not release the names of 2 other suspects nor issue warrants for their capture. It wasn't until late January 2022, about a month after Adrian's arrest, that authorities captured Anna. She faced multiple charges, including open murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Anna was held in a detention facility without bail. A local news outlet reported that law enforcement continued to search for a 3rd suspect after Anna's capture. Alicia appeared on television again, reaffirming her hope for justice in her son's case. Despite the progress, she felt there was still an important fight ahead, advocating for stricter laws in New Mexico. She insisted that a life sentence for each perpetrator was the minimum needed and expressed concern that bail could allow them to be released before trial. Alicia sought comfort and a sense of purpose by reaching out to other mothers who had also experienced the loss of children to violence. They met regularly to support one another and brainstorm ways to address community violence. During these discussions, Alicia reflected on the tragedy and sought answers to her lingering questions. She realized that unknowingly, Nicholas had made himself a target by frequently posting photos and videos of his cars and possessions on social media, drawing the attention of individuals like Anna and others with harmful intentions. In August 2022, Anna accepted a plea deal during a virtual hearing. She pleaded guilty to charges of aggravated armed robbery with a firearm, conspiracy, and others. In return, the charges of murder and kidnapping against her were dropped, and she was sentenced to serve between 5 and 15 years in prison. In contrast, Adrian pleaded not guilty to all charges during his virtual hearing. Alicia and Louise shared their devastation with the media, expressing how the strong evidence against Adrian made the judge's decision perplexing. They feared for their safety and that of their remaining children while Adrian was still free in the community. The prosecutors appealed the judge's ruling, and Elias's family felt relieved when the state Supreme Court overturned the decision. In the spring of 2024, Adrian accepted a plea deal for both the 2020 case and Elias's 2021 case. During a courtroom hearing, he admitted guilt for both crimes. Prosecutors disclosed that Anna and other accomplices from both incidents were ready to testify against him. They revealed that Anna had planned the robbery involving Nicholas and Elias, but it was emphasized that she had acted under Adrian's influence and control. Adrian was identified as the leader of the group. Before his sentencing, Adrian expressed remorse to Elias's family, but the judge sentenced him to 29 years in prison. Despite the rulings, the parents of Elias, Alicia, and Louise continue to grieve the loss of their son. Elias's death is not only a tragedy for the family but also a wake-up call for the entire community. As a promising young man, living for justice and love, Elias had his life taken away by senseless violence and negative temptations from social networks. Although justice has been served, the pain his family endures will never fade away. Their struggle, particularly that of his mother Alicia, has become a symbol of the power of motherhood and the desire to change the legal system to protect the innocent. Tiffany James was born on August 18, 1980, in Tampa, Florida. She was the only child of Rosalind James and Turner Humphrey. Her parents were never married and separated soon after her birth. Her father moved away, started a new family, and showed little interest in her. Years later, as an adult, Tiffany decided to locate her father. They spoke, and she assured him that she held no grudges and wanted to keep in touch. This reunion allowed Tiffany to meet her half-siblings and their families, leading to the development of strong, positive relationships. Meanwhile, Rosalind focused on her own life and left Tiffany with her grandparents. Although Tiffany had both biological parents, she was primarily raised by her grandparents. Her mother Rosalind visited occasionally but did not play an active role in her upbringing. It was her aunts, Barbara and Vicky, along with her grandmother Beulah, who took on the parenting responsibilities. They ensured Tiffany attended preschool and school, celebrated her achievements, and supported her in every way. She was an outstanding student with a passion for literature and a creative spirit. She dreamed of opening her own beauty salon and becoming the best in her city. Tiffany was a sociable, popular, and stylish person. She often attracted attention with her looks and confidence, making her appealing to young men. While in high school, she started dating a boy named Derek Andrews, who was a year older. They both believed their love would last forever. In her senior year, Tiffany became pregnant and gave birth to their first child, a son named Derek, on July 26, 1998. This changed her plans for college, as she dedicated herself to motherhood. Derek took on various odd jobs to support his family, while Tiffany's family helped them as much as they could. In August 2002, 4-year-old Derek became a big brother when his parents welcomed another son, Darian, named after his paternal grandfather. At this point, Tiffany and Derek were living together in a small rented apartment. Although money was tight, they remained hopeful for their future and dreamed of creating a stable life together. A couple of years later, however, their romantic feelings faded, and they decided to separate amicably. The son stayed with Tiffany while Derek supported them and made an effort to spend time with his children. He eventually began a new relationship but remained committed to being an involved father to Darian and Derek. As a single mother with 2 young sons, Tiffany started to seriously consider her future. She wanted a career that would allow her to provide for her family independently. Since she had not pursued further education after high school, she was eager to change that. Tiffany enrolled in a medical college, aiming to become a cosmetic specialist. Her ultimate goal was to open her own practice or even a clinic where she could turn her passion into a successful business. To manage her finances better, she moved back in with her grandparents, as paying for both tuition and rent was too much of a burden. Her family helped care for her sons whenever she was at work or in class. After finishing her education, she got a job at a private clinic as an assistant to a well-known doctor. She had a steady income and began advancing in her career. For a while, it appeared that everything was finally coming together for her. However, she found herself lacking a strong, supportive partner to lean on during difficult times. In early 2007, Tiffany met a man named Daryl Williams. He was 14 years older than she was and had 3 grown children from a previous marriage. Despite their age difference, this did not hinder their romantic relationship. She believed that he was a mature and trustworthy man, genuinely prepared for a serious commitment. Their relationship developed quickly, and soon, Tiffany, at 27, found herself pregnant. This news shocked both of them, but they were excited, and Daryl proposed to Tiffany, who happily accepted. However, during a routine checkup, she learned she was expecting twins. In March 2008, she welcomed twin girls, whom she named Diamond and Denial. This happy event has brought joy to her life, and she has devoted all her love to her family, cherishing every moment spent together. Tiffany enjoyed taking her children to different events, discovering new activities, and creating lasting memories. She also loved dressing her daughters in matching outfits that gave them a fashionable appearance. Her older sons participated in sports like baseball, track, and swimming, while her twins, Diamond and Denia, began dance classes and rhythmic gymnastics at an early age. As the years went by, the children grew, but Tiffany and Daryl never married. Gradually, their relationship began to deteriorate as they found it increasingly difficult to communicate. Tiffany eventually realized that Daryl was not the person she had thought he was. Their relationship ended when she discovered his infidelity. Without any hesitation, she gathered her children and departed. After separating from Daryl, Tiffany relocated with her family to the quiet town of Brandon, Florida. This community was known for its strong infrastructure, low crime rates, and affordable housing, making it an ideal place to raise a family and start over. Eager to create a stable future, Tiffany completed a hairstyling program and landed a job at one of the top salons in town. She quickly built a loyal clientele and gained a reputation for her talent and creativity. Aspiring to open her own salon one day, she began looking for potential rental locations. Her skills, ambition, and rising reputation established her as one of the most in-demand stylists in the area, paving the way for a bright career ahead. As a single mother of 4, she moved into a spacious rental apartment in a newly built residential complex situated in one of the town's finest neighborhoods. Nearby amenities included a school, a dance studio, and a large sports center, everything she needed for a comfortable and fulfilling life for her family. By 2012, her sons had become more independent and often helped care for their younger sisters. Around this time, Tiffany decided to reconnect with her father and half-siblings. She traveled to Alabama to find them, and their family bonds were restored. They began to stay in touch, visit each other for holidays, and their children quickly grew close. Life was falling into place. Her finances were stable, and she was surrounded by loved ones. Although she felt secure about her future, Tiffany, a young, ambitious, and attractive woman, yearned for romance. She still believed in love and hoped to find a man who would love her and embrace her family, a man with whom she could build a strong and happy home. In 2014, Tiffany started her own small business, which began to thrive. That same year, at 34 years old, she reconnected with Ben, a man she had known in her youth but hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. Their unexpected encounter at a shopping mall marked the start of something special. Initially, they kept their relationship private. Ben was also a single parent who had recently settled in Brandon with his 2 young children. They began as friends, sharing coffee and meaningful conversations. When Ben finally confessed his feelings for Tiffany, she felt like the happiest woman in the world and admitted she felt the same way. Their relationship grew deeper and both families supported it. Tiffany was ecstatic, savoring this newfound happiness without rushing. She kept their romance discreet, sharing details only with her closest friends and family and refraining from posting pictures of them together on social media. Gradually, she prepared for a significant change as they decided to move in together and create a home as one family. On October 1st, 2015, Tiffany posted a romantic and mysterious message on her personal social media account. The post featured a photo of 2 hands clasped together, one male and one female, both adorned with wedding bands, set against the backdrop of a Bible. The caption simply read, "Yes." This suggested that she was engaged, but she chose to keep her fiancé's identity a secret for the time being. Tiffany and her family always put a lot of effort into celebrating Halloween. They planned their costumes ahead of time, carved pumpkins into glowing lanterns, and went out to collect candy from their neighbors. By this time, Darian and Derek were old enough to enjoy the holiday with their friends, while the younger twins, Diamond and Denia, still loved going trick-or-treating with their mom. Since they lived in a large apartment complex, going door to door wasn't this thrilling. Instead, They visited a nearby neighborhood filled with single-family homes, where Halloween decorations created a festive atmosphere. Families in costumes moved from house to house, and generous homeowners made sure to have plenty of candy, so no one went home empty-handed. That night was supposed to be fun and relaxing, but no one could have predicted the tragedy that was about to unfold. A local woman was home alone, preparing to watch a horror movie to get into the Halloween spirit. The streets outside were quiet, most families had already gone home, and she didn't expect any more trick-or-treaters. Around 9 p.m., she was dozing on the couch with the TV still on when suddenly there was a loud noise, like an explosion, that woke her up. At that moment, her front door, which she had forgotten to lock, swung open. Startled, she quickly got up to shut it. What she saw on her doorstep left her frozen. A figure dressed entirely in black, wearing a hockey mask like the ones from the Friday the 13th movies, stood there. Instead of a machete, the person was holding a shotgun. For a split second, it felt like a scene from a movie or an elaborate Halloween joke. In shock and unsure of her next move, she glanced down and saw a woman lying at the figure's feet, writhing in pain and struggling to move. The masked figure looked down at her for a moment before raising the weapon again. Terrified, the woman ran for her life. She slammed the door just as two more deafening gunshots rang out. Collapsing onto the floor, she covered her head with her hands, fearing she might be next. Then, silence. The stillness was broken by a faint tapping on the window. At first, she ignored it, too frightened to move. But when the tapping came again, she cautiously approached the window and, against her better judgment, looked outside. There stood a young girl, tears streaming down her face. Without thinking of her own safety, the woman rushed to the door to help. Outside, she noticed another young girl sitting on the ground, shocked, hugging her knees. Without hesitation, she brought both girls inside, locked the door, and grabbed her phone to call for emergency services. By that time, other neighbors had heard the chaos and called the authorities. When first responders arrived, they discovered a woman lying in a pool of blood on the pavement. Despite her critical injuries, she was still alive. Paramedics did everything they could, but unfortunately, on the way to the hospital, she died from her wounds. The victim had no identification, and the two young girls were too traumatized to speak. However, as more neighbors gathered, they quickly recognized the woman, Tiffany, who is the owner of a local hair salon, along with her twin daughters, Diamond and Denia. Authorities immediately contacted Tiffany's relatives, while Diamond and Denia were taken to the hospital for evaluation. Fortunately, neither child had suffered any physical injuries, but they were deeply traumatized. Mental health professionals were brought in to help them process the event. Many people had been out celebrating that night, and several witnesses recalled the horrifying scene. However, piecing together the full story was challenging, as many struggled to believe what they had seen. It all felt too surreal, almost like a staged performance. Meanwhile, the masked attacker slipped into the crowd of costumed revelers and disappeared without a trace. Neighbors reported seeing a silver Chevrolet sedan parked near the house shortly before the incident. Witnesses noted that the car sped off after the first loud noise but stopped a short distance away moments later. It was uncertain whether the driver fled in a panic or had a connection to the attack. Unfortunately, no one saw the license plate, and no one could identify the driver's gender. Adding to the difficulty, there were no security cameras in the area to capture the incident. Witnesses could not provide even a basic description of the suspect, who was fully covered in a costume, hood, hockey mask, and gloves. They only agreed that the attacker was slightly taller than average and had a muscular build. At the crime scene, Tiffany's handbag was found on the ground, with its strap torn and its contents strewn about. Initially, investigators considered the possibility of a robbery gone wrong, but this theory was quickly dismissed. The cash inside the purse was untouched, and Tiffany was still wearing several pieces of gold jewelry. Nothing had been stolen. Moreover, it seemed unlikely that such a violent act would occur over a simple mugging, especially with a shotgun involved. The aggression of the attack suggested that it was personal. But who would want to harm Tiffany, a cherished mother and respected community member? Investigators began by questioning her ex-partners and her current boyfriend. Tiffany had been separated from her former partners, Derek Andrews and Daryl Williams, for years, and any previous conflicts had long since dissipated. Her current partner, Ben, remained a mystery since Tiffany had kept their relationship private, revealing little to friends and family. Due to this secrecy, detectives felt it necessary to question him urgently. Officers arrived at Ben's house around 5 a.m. the next morning. Despite the early hour, all the lights in the house were on, and Ben was found sitting by the front door with a shotgun. The officers ordered him to drop the weapon and raise his hands, which he complied with, insisting he was not involved in the attack. He then pleaded with the officers to protect his children, explaining that he had learned about the crime just hours earlier and was fearful that the attacker might come after him next. He felt a strong need to protect his family. During the questioning, Ben shared that in the months prior to the incident, Tiffany had told him about someone she believed was stalking her. She suspected it might be her ex-fiancé, Daryl, who was also the father of her twin daughters, Diamond and Denia. Their separation had been difficult, and they were currently engaged in a custody battle over the girls. Ben confirmed his whereabouts on Halloween night with a strong alibi. He stated that he, Tiffany, and their children had gone trick-or-treating earlier that evening. Later, he took his children to visit relatives while Tiffany and the twins intended to return to their home briefly before staying the night at his place. However, she never showed up. Almost at midnight, Tiffany's oldest son called to deliver the devastating news. Once investigators verified Ben's alibi, they released him and allowed him to go home. The focus then shifted to Daryl. Was he involved in such a violent act? Detectives were skeptical. Could he really have committed something so horrific in front of his own daughters, leaving them with lifelong trauma? On November 1st, officers visited Daryl's last known address but found that he no longer lived there. Instead, they encountered his adult daughter, who informed them that her father had moved in with his new girlfriend 6 months ago. She was visibly shaken when she heard about Tiffany's tragic death and was clearly in shock. His daughter disclosed concerning information about his short temper and controlling behavior. He was known to be domineering and would become furious when things didn't go his way. Additionally, he had a strong interest in firearms and owned a shotgun. Daryl's daughter explained that her father's breakup with Tiffany had been very contentious. He harbored deep resentment over having to pay child support and had fought hard for full custody of their twins, even though he knew he had little chance of winning. However, she noted that if Tiffany were gone, he would have had a better chance of gaining custody of the girls. Her daughter described her father as ruthless and believed he was capable of committing a crime. After speaking with her, investigators went to Daryl's workplace, a large chemical plant. His supervisor spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated worker who could handle the workload of 2 people and was always willing to take on extra shifts. However, Daryl's aggressive demeanor often led to conflicts with co-workers, sometimes resulting in physical confrontations. Notably, on the night of November 1st, Daryl, for the first time, refused a last-minute shift change, citing personal reasons. This unusual behavior raised further suspicions, as it left him without a confirmed alibi for the night of the crime. Detectives visited the home of Daryl's new girlfriend, Rosalind. They noticed a silver Chevrolet sedan in the driveway that matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. When Rosalind answered the door and saw the officers, she appeared nervous. However, after learning the reason for their visit, she insisted that Daryl had stayed with her all night and had not left the house. Since there was no physical evidence to hold Daryl, the investigators decided to interview the main witnesses, Daryl and Tiffany's daughters, Diamond and Denia. They were still struggling to cope with the trauma. Denia was mostly silent, experienced nightmares, and couldn't sleep without the lights on. Diamond seemed to handle things better but would break down in tears whenever the conversation shifted to that tragic night. To help them, a skilled psychologist was brought in to gently support the sisters through their trauma, and over time, they began to share their experiences. They revealed that while staying with their father, they often saw a mysterious man delivering folders of papers to him. One day, when their father stepped out, they couldn't resist their curiosity and peeked inside the folders, discovering photos of their home, pictures of their mother in various locations around town, and even images of Ben's house. This leads them to realize that their father has employed a private investigator to follow their mother, Tiffany. Even more concerning was the fact that just 2 days before Tiffany's death, she had won full custody of the twins in court, requiring Daryl to pay child support, a situation he strongly opposed. With this new evidence, the police obtained a warrant for Daryl's arrest. Given his known history with firearms and the likelihood that he might resist, the officers decided it would be safer to arrest him at work, where security was tight, minimizing the risk of an armed confrontation. When the officers arrived, Daryl appeared shocked but did not resist arrest. He calmly allowed them to handcuff him and requested to speak with a lawyer. Initially, both he and Rosalind denied any involvement in the crime. However, investigators found phone records and GPS data showing they were both near the crime scene that night. Rosalind was the first to cooperate. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she agreed to testify against Daryl, stating that she had not known his exact intentions, she had merely driven him to the location and waited in the car. When she heard a loud noise, she panicked and drove off but slowed down to let Daryl jump in before fleeing. She claimed that she later provided him with an alibi out of fear for her own safety. Daryl faced charges of first-degree homicide, which could lead to the death penalty. In an attempt to escape this severe punishment, he tried to shift the blame. Upon learning that Rosalind had testified against him, he accused her of having an affair with his adult son and claimed that they had conspired to frame him. He was willing to implicate his own son in a serious crime to save himself. However, investigators quickly disproved his claims by thoroughly examining the evidence and confirming that his son had no involvement in the events of that night. With no alternatives available, Daryl eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. In April 2017, at the age of 49, he was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after at least 25 years. On March 19, 2024, Heath Smiley returned home from work, unaware of the shocking confrontation that awaited him. As soon as he entered the house, a gunshot rang out. His wife's 15-year-old stepdaughter, Carly Gregg, had been waiting. Heath was struck in the neck by a bullet but somehow survived. In a frantic 911 call, he exclaimed, he thinks his wife has been shot. He said that he just got home and there is blood everywhere. What could drive a teenager to commit such a terrible act? Despite what seemed like clear evidence, security footage, eyewitness testimonies, and confessions, this case revealed complexities that made it difficult to understand. The day started like any other for Carly and her mother, Ashley Smiley. Carly, 14, a gifted student who had skipped a grade, was known for her intelligence but was also facing emotional challenges. She was in therapy for anxiety and stress, largely due to her troubled relationship with her biological father, Kevin Gregg, who struggled with banned substance addiction. Meanwhile, Ashley was a devoted algebra teacher at Northwest Rankin High School and a cherished member of the community. She concentrating on her career and family. At school that day, Carly still interacted with her friends and teachers. Although she appeared normal on the outside, she was grappling with serious issues, including conflicts with her mother over banned substance use. Ashley had recently learned that Carly was using marijuana through vape pens, which created tension between them. After arriving home around 4 p.m., Ashley, having received information about Carly's supposed marijuana use, decided to confront her. As soon as they entered the house, Ashley went to Carly's bedroom to look for evidence of its use, and at this moment, they were alone in the home. Surveillance footage captured Carly approaching her mother with an object concealed behind her back. Ashley had a loaded gun in the house for protection because she was worried about Carly's biological father, Kevin. Carly found the gun under the bedside where Ashley slept. Shortly after an argument started, Carly has attacked her mother 3 times at close range. After the shooting, Carly sent a panicked text to a friend asking for help with an emergency. When her friend received the message, she hurried to Carly's house. Upon arriving at the front door, Carly asked her friend in a serious tone, "Are you squeamish around dead bodies?" She then led her friend to the bedroom where Ashley was lying on the floor. After showing her friend the scene, Carly reportedly removed an indoor camera from its mount and put it in a refrigerator, which suggested she was trying to hide evidence and indicated that her actions were planned. Before leaving the office, Heath received a text from Ashley's phone asking when he would be home from work. He replied that he would be working a bit late. Heath got home around 5:03 p.m. and didn't notice anything strange as he entered the house. However, when he opened the kitchen door, a gunshot was fired. Fortunately for Heath, Carly missed her shot. During the incident, he was grazed by a bullet in the neck and then tried to chase after Carly as she ran outside. Heath Smiley made a desperate call to 911. His tone was urgent as he shared details about the incident. He mentioned that he had been shot in the neck and that Carly, his stepdaughter, had fled the scene. He stated that Carly shot him in the head and told the dispatcher that Carly had a gun, which he believed was left on the kitchen counter. He described Carly and noted that she ran away. This information was essential for law enforcement as they prepared to respond. Deputies from the Rankin County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene within minutes of the call. They found Heath outside the front door, visibly injured and in need of medical help. Officers assessed his condition and called for medical assistance while securing the area. As deputies entered the house, they found Ashley lying on the floor of her bedroom. The scene was chaotic, with clear signs of a violent struggle. The deputies observed multiple gunshot wounds on Ashley's body, confirming that she had been attacked at close range. The first steps taken by law enforcement involved securing the crime scene and collecting evidence. They documented the position of Ashley's body, gathered possible ballistic evidence from both the inside and outside of the home. The deputies reviewed surveillance footage from the residence to establish a timeline of events leading up to the shooting. Heath shared a detailed account of what he experienced when he returned home, which later became important testimony in court. His observations about Carly's behavior right before and after the shooting were essential for understanding her mental state. As part of their investigation, deputies began searching for Carly by using outdoor surveillance footage to trace her movements after she fled. A helicopter from the Mississippi Highway Patrol assisted in the search. Carly was captured about 30 minutes after the shooting without any further incidents. She was taken into custody and charged with several offenses. The evidence gathered at the scene, along with statements from Heath, combined with the prompt response from law enforcement and their careful evidence collection, set the stage for a complex legal case against Carly. She was detained at Rankin County Jail in Brandon, Mississippi, while awaiting trial. Carly was charged as an adult with murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence, with her bond set at $1 million due to the seriousness of the charges. During this time, Carly remained in custody as the legal process continued. While Carly was in custody, her legal team began preparing her defense. The prosecution relied on evidence from the scene, including eyewitness statements and forensic analysis. Carly pleaded not guilty, insisting she was innocent. As the case moved forward, she underwent multiple mental health evaluations to better understand her psychological state before the incident. Her history of anxiety and past therapy sessions became important aspects of the defense's strategy. Months after her arrest, Carly was presented with a plea deal that would result in a 40-year prison sentence, but she, through her defense team, chose to reject it and proceed to trial. This choice reflected her determination to fight the charges against her. As the trial date drew closer, Carly's lawyers concentrated on collecting evidence and witness statements. They aimed to create a thorough defense that would address both the factual aspects of the case and Carly's mental health challenges. Their preparation included reviewing surveillance videos, analyzing text messages, and consulting with mental health professionals. While Greg's defense team does not deny that she killed her mother, attorneys claim that the teenager was experiencing a mental health crisis on the day of the murder and does not remember the shooting. The situation with Carly took a significant turn on August 19th when the judge questioned the defense attorneys. Although Carly was found competent to stand trial, concerns were raised about her mental condition at the time of the alleged crime. In a courtroom that attracted national interest, Judge Dewey Arthur challenged the defense's handling of an important mental health evaluation report. He was worried about the late submission of the report, implying it might have been a tactic to gain an advantage in the trial. Defense attorneys Bridget Todd and Kevin Kemp argued that the delay was unintentional. They pointed out the challenges in obtaining the report and assured the court that they would provide it to the prosecution as soon as it was complete. Arthur then emphasized the need for transparency and fairness in the legal system. As the trial date approached, the case of Carly Gregg continued to evolve. On September 10th, just 6 days before the trial, the defense filed a motion with the judge to exclude a key piece of evidence, a urine test taken when Carly was admitted to the detention center. The defense argued that the test was done without proper authorization and should be considered inadmissible. In response, prosecutors asserted that the test was necessary for safety reasons and pointed out that Carly had voluntarily admitted to using marijuana. They argued that this evidence was important for understanding her mental state at the time of the crime. Judge Dewey Arthur carefully considered the case and decided in favor of the prosecution, rejecting the defense's request to exclude the banned substance test results. The judge deemed the search reasonable given the circumstances and associated risks. Additionally, he issued a gag order preventing Carly's lawyers from discussing the case with the media, following allegations that the defense had improperly commented on case details. The first day of the Carly Gregg murder trial was marked by a somber mood in the courtroom. The prosecution introduced evidence, which included a 911 call recording and body camera footage from the day of the shooting. Carly Gregg, now 15 years old, is accused of murdering her mother, Ashley Smiley, and trying to kill her stepfather, Heath Smiley. The trial began with testimony from Rankin County dispatcher, who played the 911 call made by Heath. In the recording, Heath sounded panicked and described the shooting and the heartbreaking moment he found his wife's body. The prosecution then showed body camera footage from Rankin County Patrol deputy, who arrived at the scene. This footage captured the chaotic moment as Heath, visibly shaken, explained to the deputy what had happened and where his deceased wife was located. The jury viewed the footage, which starkly depicted the tragic aftermath inside the home where Ashley was found lifeless. In their opening statements, the prosecution described Carly's life, which involved her relationship with a boyfriend, social media activity, and instances of self-harm. They claimed that on the day of the shooting, Carly had a confrontation with a friend at school and that her mother found vape pens in her room. The prosecution contended that Carly shot her mother using a .357 Magnum gun that she was hiding behind her back. They provided evidence to support their case, including ballistic evidence and gunshot residue found on Carly's hands. The defense presented an alternate view, arguing that Carly had a loving relationship with her mother and was generally a good student. They claimed that when her stepfather came home, Carly could have been frightened and confused, which might have contributed to the tragic incident. As evidence was presented, the jury had the challenging task of deciding whether Carly Gregg was guilty or innocent. On the second day of trial, details surrounding the incident were further explored. Carly's stepfather, Heath, took the stand to share his version of events. He spoke about his positive relationship with Carly and expressed his respect for Ashley as a mother. Heath described that the morning of the shooting seemed normal and stated there were no obvious signs of distress from Carly. He recounted how he received a text from Ashley. He returned home, only to encounter chaos when he opened the door and faced a gun. He described the struggle to take the gun from Carly and the gunshots that followed. After the shooting, he observed that Carly looked scared and was in a state of hysteria. Heath testified that he searched the house for an intruder but found no one. Friends of Carly spoke about her character and the changes they noticed in her behavior. They described her as a good person with no history of violence, but they observed increasing banned substance use and worrying comments about wanting to harm her parents. One Carly's friend shared a conversation she had with Carly after the shooting. She was the friend Carly called for help after Carly attacked her mother. She told the court that Carly had allegedly confessed to shooting her mother and indicated a wish to harm her stepfather. The girl testified that she heard gunshots after she ran into the backyard. The trial also examined Carly's relationship with her biological father, Kevin. Heath said Kevin had a history of banned substance use, which raised concerns about his influence in Carly's life. Heath mentioned specific instances where Kevin's behavior negatively affected Carly, including forcing her to drink alcohol when she was young. The defense used the issue of Carly's biological father to shift attention away from the murder being a deliberate act, suggesting instead that it was a tragic accident due to Carly's unstable mental health. The defense continued to emphasize Carly's mental health issues and her love for her mother, arguing that the tragic events were the result of her mental state rather than a purposeful act of violence. On the third day of the trial, the complexities of the case were further explored. The defense provided an in-depth overview of Carly's mental health history using medical records, school documents, journal entries, and a sketchbook. Dr. Andrew Clark, a well-respected child and adolescent psychiatrist, served as an expert witness for the defense. He diagnosed Carly with bipolar II disorder, which is characterized by mood swings and periods of mania or depression. Dr. Clark presented extensive evidence from Carly's medical records, revealing her prolonged battles with depression and anxiety. He also discussed specific instances of self-harm and troubling behaviors from several years ago. The examination of Carly's journal entries and sketchbook exposed a more troubling aspect of her mental condition. Dr. Clark shared excerpts that conveyed feelings of despair, hopelessness, and aggression. These entries shed light on Carly's inner struggles and possible issues with intrusive thoughts. The defense argued that Carly's mental health problems, along with various life stressors, created a situation that led to her violent actions. They highlighted her challenging childhood, which included the death of her sister and her parents' divorce. The prosecution disputed Dr. Andrew Clark's evaluation of Carly. They raised concerns about the reliability of Carly's own account of her symptoms and contended that she was able to distinguish between right and wrong when the crimes occurred. On the third day of the trial, Carly's relationship with her biological father was once again examined. The defense presented evidence indicating that Carly's relationship with Kevin was troubled, leading to emotional distress due to his actions. This information reinforced the argument that Carly's mental health was affected by her family situation. On the fourth day of the trial, the state presented rebuttal witnesses to challenge the defense's claims about Carly's mental condition. The first witness was a psychiatric nurse practitioner who evaluated Carly in January 2024. She testified that during her evaluation and follow-up sessions, Carly clearly stated that she did not hear voices. The nurse also mentioned that she adjusted Carly's medication to help with her depression and anxiety. Carly did not report experiencing any hallucinations or delusions in later sessions. The next witness to testify before the jury was Rebecca Kirk, a licensed professional counselor. She had meetings with Carly for counseling on 9 different occasions prior to the tragic events of March 19th. During her testimony, Kirk stated that Carly did not show any self-harm or homicidal thoughts during their sessions. She highlighted that depression and anxiety are common issues among her clients, indicating that Carly's symptoms were not unusual. The last witness on the fourth day of testimony was a forensic psychiatrist tasked with evaluating Carly's mental state according to Mississippi's legal standards for insanity. He reviewed various types of evidence, including Carly's journal entries, her statements, and the context of the case. Based on his evaluation, he concluded that Carly was aware of the nature and wrongness of her actions at the time of the incident. He pointed out that while some of Carly's writings and statements were dramatic, others raised concerns. He stressed in court that the low dosage of Lexapro Carly had recently been prescribed could not explain her alleged actions. The state's expert witnesses had very different opinions compared to the defense's expert. Dr. Clark previously testified that Carly was undergoing a mental health crisis at the time of the shooting, mentioning her mood swings, eating disorders, self-harm, and hallucinations as signs of her declining mental health. The courtroom was charged with emotions when the sentence was announced. Carly began to cry. Her family also showed their feelings. Before the jury could issue their final verdict on the sentence, both the prosecution and defense delivered their closing arguments. Prosecutors stated that Carly Gregg did not show any remorse for her actions, highlighting that she was aware of the nature and consequences of her behavior. She provided evidence to support her claim that Gregg acted with planning and intent. On the morning of the 5th day of trial, a key moment arrived. The jury took 2 hours to reach a unanimous decision, was ready to announce their verdict. As the courtroom quieted, the judge solemnly declared that Carly Gregg was guilty on all 3 counts: murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. After the verdict, the jury moved on to the sentencing phase to decide the punishment for Carly based on the evidence and the seriousness of her actions. Considering the gravity of the crimes, the judge sentenced Carly Gregg to life in prison without the possibility of parole for murdering her mother and attempting to murder her stepfather. Additionally, she received a 10-year sentence for tampering with evidence, but this term would run concurrently, meaning Carly would serve a total of life in prison. Carly is not finished yet. Just a few weeks after her trial concluded, she began seeking a new trial. Should she have accepted a 40-year plea deal, or was it wise to go to trial?